Story 1. I had to throw out my psychotic daughter-in-law who had mentally tortured my son. Everyone thinks, including my son, that I'm an insecure, paranoid mother who cannot give space and freedom to her son to make his own decisions. And this is all just because I resent my daughter-in-law, right? But I don't resent her. I just had some reservations about her. And I feel so stuck about whether I should act upon my past insecurities or give him space. I watch as my son, who has become oblivious to the psychotic woman he loves, end up ruining his life as a result of her. How can I just stay silent and witness all this happening? Hi, my name's Martha. I'm 55 and female, and I'm the mother of Jacob, who's 28, whom I brought up single-handedly. Though the life of a single parent is not easy, I love it. And the girl who entered Jacob's and my life is Jessica, his wife, his childhood friend, or to be precise, his childhood love. All this drama began with a doorbell ring. As I expected Jacob to be home, hurriedly I went to fetch the door. My heartbeat stopped when I saw those pair of eyes, violet doe eyes, staring back at me. Jacob introduced her to me, and I did not need an introduction. I remember her perfectly as if she had met me yesterday. Shaken back to the present, today that same Jessica, now 27 years of age, standing around 5'4", returned my smiles as she entered shyly. Jacob freshens up and helps me set the table. I tried to keep myself busy to avoid further interaction with her. Jessica was warm and friendly with me, and I wondered if she had changed in all those years. As soon as she entered, she looked around and complimented the place, but I sensed the sarcasm dripping from her voice. She commented on my food being too oily, described what kind of taste she prefers, and suggested we try that out. And I noted one more reason not to like her. Jacob tries to tell her about his favorite childhood comfort food, but she interrupts him, saying it's really unhealthy and he should instead try her favorite comfort meal. Jacob was a bit taken aback, but just agreed and nodded. She swooned over Jacob after we finished our dinner. We finished our dinner, and she asked Jacob to drop her home, but I said it was not too late. Jacob would call her a taxi. She grimaced, but nodded. Jacob walks her out and catches a cab for her. He lifts his arm to give her a goodbye hug, but she stepped back and just sat down in the car. But he didn't let her close the gate. They were talking about something later when she went to the door and shut, and Jacob turned around smiling. I asked why did she get upset. He laughed and said she was just teasing, nothing serious, and I was remembering everything that happened 20 years ago. Sitting on my bed, I thought of each memory of that moment that I always missed but kept avoiding, because Jessica's mom was the only friend for whom I still grieved at her loss. So let me tell you about 20 years ago and what happened. It was a summer afternoon when I saw a truck unloading luggage. I concluded that somebody was moving into our neighborhood. Then a car stopped beside the truck and a little girl, barely 9 years of age, with blonde curls and violet doe eyes, jumped out of the vehicle with a cotton doll in her hand. That's when I met Jessica. She saw me, I smiled, but she didn't return it and went inside the house. After that, a lady stomped her foot out of the car and rushed inside by slamming the door behind her. There was also a guy who was driving but could not look at his face. It seemed like a couple picked a fight moments ago. I miss Thomas, my late husband, who passed away 3 years ago when Jacob was 11. I wished luck to the couple because these moments are precious and one never knows when they will last. Later in the evening, I heard my doorbell ring, and I found Jessica's mother standing with a casserole in her hand. She said that she had just moved in there and had a bit of pudding that she wanted to share with us. I welcomed her inside for a cup of tea, and she told me about herself. She moved in from Seattle, and her husband has been transferred. He was a banker, and they have a daughter, Jessica. She is 10 years of age, and they will get her admitted to school within a few days. I also told her about myself, and she sympathized for my husband's death. She was so warm and polite that no one could imagine that a few moments ago she was the same person who banged on the car door so aggressively. I mean, it's pretty hard to judge people for who you really are and what they're going through, and she got up, offered to come over to catch up, and asked to bring Jacob along with me. My casual interactions with her became so frequent that we did not realize we had become friends. We started going to kiddie parties together, shopping for groceries, etc. Then, after a few days, I was busy at the garage while Jacob was playing along with the other boys in the street, and the ball fell at Jessica's house. Well, all the guys pushed Jacob to get to it, and reluctantly he went inside and found Jessica. He asked her for the ball, and shyly and nervously she returned it. He smiled and thanked her. That was the first interaction they had with each other, and Jessica looked a little surprised after talking to him. The next afternoon, when I picked up Jacob from his school bus, I saw Jessica also getting down. I greeted her, and she just looked at me. "Bad manners, Jessica," I heard from her mother standing behind me. She instructed her to return the greetings because it's impolite to not respond. We walked down the streets, and Jacob accompanied her all the way home and waved to her goodbye. To my surprise, she turned and waved back, smiling. Later that afternoon, I found Jacob holding Jessica's hands and standing at the door. I invited them both and offered them a couple muffins and lemonade. Due to her friendship with Jacob, she also started opening up to me. But things did not remain good for very long. Some disturbing noises became more frequent than I used to hear from her house, like random voices of things breaking, or heavy objects hitting the floor, and voices of someone yelling were also to be heard. Jessica's mom started turning silent and distracted, and my interaction with her started to reduce. She looked more anxious and reserved, and along with that, some things began to change about her during the shirt's duration. Like her always leaving before sunset and always wearing a full-sleeve dress and the scorching summer heat. She started wearing more makeup, even though some of the marks of fingerprints were visible on her wrist. I tried to ask her, but she laughed it off with some excuse, and yes, I was worried about her, so I tried harder to ask her, and she confessed that her husband had some anger issues and had started drinking again. I volunteered to help and also suggested filing a complaint, but then she was hopeful, as he used to be so loving in the past, and maybe he would just change this time, maybe. Well, she asked for some time, and I gave it to her, thinking she would come to me on her own. After all, I always reminded her of my support, kept all my communications open to her, and never made her feel alone. But waiting for her to come to me for help might be the biggest mistake ever, because one night I woke up because of the loud sound of an ambulance. A chill ran down my spine. I saw a corpse being carried in the ambulance, and my feet froze ice cold. I still could not shake off that dreadful view of Jessica's mother's lifeless body being carried away. The guilt ate me inside out, and later it was proven that she committed, harm to herself because she found her husband cheating on her, which led her to give up on all things and ties, including her marriage, family, and her own life. I felt sorry for Jessica's loss. She was really close to her mom, and she always felt loved by her. It was evident through her reactions, as she always chose to listen to her and did everything only when she nodded at her. I hardly saw her dad around or home because, his presence was pretty evident through the noise of things being thrown and hit, and that's the only way I knew he was there. Update. After a year. Guys, I can safely conclude that the impact of her parents' constant aggression has been on Jessica's mind at such a tender age. She actually turned out to be more reserved than the kids her age. She hardly speaks, responds, or reacts to anything, and I never saw her smile. She stayed alone without any friends, so I tried several times to interact with her by initiating the conversation, offering her candy, but she ignores me like I simply do not exist. With Jessica's recent behavior, it was quite evident that the loss of her mother has taken a severe toll on her mental and emotional health. She turned out to be a bit more aggressive with each passing year, and credit also goes to her father's parenting, who was nonchalant and absolutely aggressive towards her. She often directs her anger at her father and talks back to him. Jessica was approaching her teenage years, yet her rebellious actions and degree of violence were not less than those of a 16-year-old teenager. Whenever her father becomes aggressive in his parenting, she snaps back by saying she's not a mom and never wants to be like her. When everything was failing and falling apart in Jessica's life, only one thing bloomed, and it was her friendship with Jacob. On one usual day, the doorbell rang, and I found Jacob, who was 11 years old at the time, standing right there alone with Jessica. Holding her hand? I was surprised to see Jessica smile because this was the first time I'd seen her smile in a long time. She was smiling, not by looking at me, but only at Jacob. He brought her inside and jumped on his toes, telling me that he was going to show her his new car that I gifted him yesterday, and he pulled her into his room. Jacob and Jessica became friends, or rather, should I say best friends. Almost in an instant, Jacob had other guy friends around, but since he met her, he has only been found talking to her, showing her things, and even sharing ice cream at school lunch with her. They have almost been always inseparable ever since. But Jacob's interaction with his other friends was reduced. The school's principal called me one day concerned about Jacob's because, well, he frequently hangs out with Jessica a lot, which is a total troublemaker and a walking disaster. Last week she fought with a group of boys, and now she's talked back to her teacher and humiliated him. They're looking forward to rusticating her because she's not responding to their counseling sessions. They warned me to not let Jacob spoil being in her company. I thought of talking to her father once to inform him about the issues with Jessica and convince him to be sensitive while dealing with her. When I visited Jessica's house, Jessica turned gloomier and thinner. Her father yelled at her to serve the guests, example me, but mistakenly she dropped something on the floor, then shattered it into pieces. Her dad raised his hand to hit her. Angry, Jessica started throwing things around to defend herself, and a glass object she threw was close enough to hit my head. But I was lucky she missed. Well, she ran to her room, banging the door shut behind her, and her father yelled at her for her disobedience and reckless behavior. He swore to send her to her hostel for the misbehavior and craziness he's been dealing with, and he apologized to me on her behalf. Witnessing her actions was nothing as compared to the look in his eyes, reflecting her madness. Her rage in her eyes was so intense that it gave me absolute goosebumps. Before leaving, I turned around and something just came to my mind that I could not resist. So, I finally asked him about what exactly happened with her mother. He was not prepared for this sudden question, so he looked quite uncomfortable with it, and he said he was too drunk to think straight. He didn't realize that she thought that gave her such a terrible idea of taking her own life, and let me deal with her reckless daughter. I got angry at those words, so I asked about rumors that they were cheating on her. Annoyed, he said that it was just a one-time fling, and I should stay out of his business, while saying that he shut the door on my face. Single-handedly parenting kids is very tough. Missing Thomas, it also reminds me of how Jessica's father has been parenting her all alone since her mother died, because at the time when I punished Jacob to keep him away from her, I felt so hopeless. And really helpless as well. After a few days, as expected, Jessica was being rusticated from school, and her father had moved her to a hostel in another state, where he got transferred. Though I was relieved that she left, I felt horrible for both Jacob and Jessica. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. So that was somewhat of a backstory. Now we're going to jump back to the present where the story started now that we know the history of Jacob and Jessica. Update number 2, back to the present. I saw the calendar. It is 2023 now. And all that happened 20 years ago. It's still fresh as today in my mind. It was already late, so I pulled my covers up and just lulled myself into sleep. The next morning, I woke up late into the morning and the hall was empty, and I found my breakfast on the table with a note saying that he was going to bring her tonight, so he requested that I make a turkey for dinner because he planned a surprise. How can I not expect that it won't be Jessica? All my fears are coming alive. So, when she came up this time, I noticed she was happier than yesterday. Both their body language was more relaxed and open than being shy and reserved the last time. This time, she was more outspoken about everything, and she dolled up and dressed up for today, though I don't know what the occasion is. I'm sure it'll be the turning point in our lives, and I cannot change that. I had to go with the flow for the time being, and Jacob proposed to her and put the ring on her finger. She could not control her tears, and seeing them overwhelmed me, and I hoped that at least their love for each other would be enough to deal with all the obstacles in life. Excitedly, they both started discussing their marriage and whatever upcoming arrangements needed to be finalized. Jacob expressed his wish to have a small budget wedding, but Jessica interrupted by saying that she wants a luxurious wedding with limited people. Example, a wedding only with the close ones. Jacob's bride face shrunk, and in her justification she said that it is one thing and marrying Jacob and making him a part of her life was the most special thing ever to happen to her, so she wants the moment to be absolutely perfect. To her point of view, intimate and small weddings are better, as they do have a bit more privacy, right? Jacob and I did seem to agree with her on that one. After she left, Jacob helped me do the dishes, and I tried my best to just, get my luck by conveying to him that it's been so long since he met her after so many years, and it'll be better for both of them to get to know each other first before just jumping into a lifelong commitment after marrying. I tried to hint that there have been so many things that turned out to be problematic last time. He refused, saying that he knew her already and that things had changed a lot since then. Well, people do change with time, so at least she should be given a chance. He told me that he's happy and is ready to take a risk by choosing to spend the rest of his life with her. And he also said that I would also end up liking Jessica. Hearing such a response, I realized that it was highly unlikely that he would change his mind, so I chose not to say anything. But I still think the anger issues with Jessica were not dealt with quite right, so they might be lurking in her somewhere. Update number 1 after the present time. Being a mother, I had my own expectations of an ideal marriage for my only son. But when we reached the venue to see the wedding preparations, I saw that whatever details we had discussed with Jessica, everything changed. And all the ideas about the arrangements, venue, decor, and shortlisting of the menu were according to her likings and dislikings. I tried to question Jacob about this, and Jessica said on his behalf that the wedding should be according to the bride's wishes. After all, it was her special day. When I questioned her about the expenses that were mostly done by us, she said that it was Jacob's wedding as well, and it won't matter after all, we are already a family. And she looked at him. Well, asking, right, Jacob? Jacob nodded and agreed, and Jessica said Jacob is already loving it. I was disappointed, but I knew it was too late to argue. Jessica prefixed everything. She was in charge of making all the arrangements, scheduling appointments, shopping, running errands, you name it. So, the wedding bells rang, and it was time for the ceremony when the bride and groom took the vows for each other. There she did something really strange. She sought allegiance from Jacob as one of the wedding vows and took the promise of never letting any third person come in between them. This moved Jacob, who happily agreed. I failed to foresee the repercussions that the vow could hold for us in the future, and she made the wedding entirely about her and her beloved Jacob. No other person existed for her or mattered to her, and poor Jacob did not even realize that. By the end of the wedding, I could perceive a sense of achievement on her face as she finally got what she wanted, i.e. Jacob. The next day I saw Jacob and Jessica arguing over something already, so I tried to ask them. He informed me that since the wedding was quite expensive for him, he wants to save for a few months before applying for a loan to buy a home. Till then, he expressed his desire to stay here at my home, and I never had any issues with that. But the only person who had them was Jessica. You see, Jessica says that she needs her own space and everything according to her taste, and the house is too small to accommodate her needs. Jacob tried to convince Jessica by promising her he would get her dream home just the way she wanted it, and he begged for her support to make that come true. Soon, reluctantly, she agreed. Update number 2 after a week. Jessica made breakfast for Jacob and denied him butter for his toast, saying he's already out of shape and needs to cut calories to be a bit healthier. It doesn't end there. She even objected to the shirt he was wearing, saying it did not match the tone of his skin, so he could not leave without changing it. I interfered, saying that he was getting late. Let him go. He thanked me for saving him and left in a hurry. That evening, when Jacob was about to come home, I saw the kitchen empty and Jessica was on her phone talking to a broker. As she wanted to leave this place forever, I reminded her that it was time for dinner, but she just looked at me and continued with her phone call. I always hated her reactions, but I did not want to create drama since she would move to her place, hopefully soon. Jacob was about to come in half an hour, and not a single thing was cooked. Then I saw his text, saying he would be late due to a meeting, and I felt relieved, thinking I finally had enough time to cook a meal since I could not rely on Jessica any longer. I chopped the veggies, boiled the beans. Meanwhile, Jessica came up, asking about Jacob. I asked, did she not check her phone? Meanwhile, I doubted if she expected him sooner or why she didn't cook anything, and I told her to help me out, and she reluctantly agreed and took forever to peel the potatoes. Running out of time, I told her just do the dishes, and she broke my crockery. I was so annoyed that I started yelling at her. She glared at me angry, and before she could say anything, Jacob came over asking what was wrong. He fetched a glass of water for me, while she took a handful of water from the sink and dabbed some droplets right there on her face, pretending to cry. Jacob instantly consoled her and started taking her side. I tried to explain, but he did not want to listen and took her to the bedroom. Furious, I threw my apron away, shut off the induction, and left out of the cooking. I'm not going to cook him anything from now on. How about that? Update number 3. The next morning. Jacob wore what Jessica decided he needed to wear, and she made his favorite breakfast, asking him to take her shopping and have a date in the evening, and he promised to come home in time. In the evening, she dressed up and was ready and waiting for him, but he got there an hour late, and waiting for him made her absolutely furious. I stopped cooking for Jacob, and furious Jessica won't let him eat. He apologized to her, and she asked for expensive jewelry as an apology, and Jacob was not in a position to afford such expensive gifts. Enraged, she said he does not deserve her. She was doing so much to support him with his needs. She compromised her comfort by living and adjusting with his mother. She was cooking him meals, and he's a worthless husband who cannot buy her happiness. Sticking my ears to the door, I was actually listening to their entire drama while munching on my favorite caramel popcorn. Jessica was almost supervising everything about Jacob. Being a mother, I never did that. What to wear for what occasion, keeping track of his calorie intake, and things escalated so much that she did not even leave his personal life. One day at the breakfast table, Jacob told Jessica that he was going to be late since he was going to dinner with his clients. Jessica bombarded him with a million questions like, why could he not bring them to his place? What kind of people are they, and he could not bring them home? Jacob gets nervous, and to convince her, well, he gave her his entire contact list and informed her about all his friends that he had. I could predict she would not like the mention of his own life, where he has friends apart from her, as she considered herself his best friend and his only friend, and she's now his wife, and now that makes her absolutely jealous. That day, Jessica shows up at his workplace without informing him and introduces herself as Jacob's wife. Jacob, shocked and confused by seeing her, asked the reason for her visit. She didn't answer, but made an announcement about inviting everyone, including his clients, to our place for dinner. Everyone thought how lucky Jacob was to have such a supportive wife, and she said hi to each of his friends. I was the last person to hear about all this. At the office, she clung to Jacob the entire time and got to know each and every one of his friends. His colleagues he worked under, his juniors, peers, bosses, manager, clients, you name it. Jacob was furious. Well, with Jessica, for taking such decisions and initiating them without consulting him, but because everyone admired and respected her so much, his anger did start to subside. Jacob thanked her at last, but she was confused and started asking about a new employee who is his junior. You see, Jacob was confused and denied. Jessica said if he's not lying, then he is always having to tell her everything. Jacob, in a good mood, traded his command and with a smile. She also asked Jacob to share his mobile and bank account passwords, and he did that as well. Update number 3. Well, guys, things have been going downhill and getting worse ever since. Jacob spends almost half of his time trying to justify his actions, over-explaining everything about why he did whatever he did for the day. Constant begging for apologies by Jacob, and these continuously last warnings by Jessica, because if he fails to do so, she starts counting the favors she did him and plays out the victim card. Blaming him for being an incapable husband, and, if needed, compare him to her dad. Bringing out her past insecurities and rubbing them on Jacob's face led to Jacob always trying to compensate for his mistakes by trying to meet her unrealistic expectations and pampering her. She turned out to be an absolute priority in his life, and even after that, things got worse. From informing Jessica about his whereabouts to seeking permission from her through birthdays and anniversaries to buying anything for himself or for me. As she keeps track of everything that he's spending in the name of saving money for a said dream house. Jessica showers her love to him only because he agrees to something she wishes. At that moment, she agrees to compromise with her dream of owning her own house. How hypocritical of her. After 6 months, Jacob turned out to be frustrated that he kept lashing out at his coworkers and any phone calls that he had. He always looked irritated and absolutely tense, and he hardly hung out with anybody. Totally cut off from his social life due to his exhaustion from explaining, arguing, and convincing Jessica about every person he comes in contact with. He was afraid that if Jessica lost her temper, she would end up hurting them, and he doesn't wish the same harm upon anyone else, not even me. I try to keep my communications open with him, sometimes reaching out to him so that he can seek more consolation after sharing, but he refuses to take any chances. All he says is that Jessica was hurt by her dad's behavior, and his aggressive parenting which caused her anger issues. She was such a loving and caring person. She'll soon be the same innocent Jessica she was before her mother's death. He also reasoned that because her mother was submissive, she's kind of insecure and does not want to end up like her. Otherwise, history would go ahead and repeat itself. Listening to Jacob's words reminded me of Jessica's mother, or to be precise, she became like Verdad and Jacob, who turned into Jessica's mother, who was abused the same way in false hopes that her husband would change. But it turned out that he never had even an ounce of regret that she left this world because of him. In fact, she was blamed for leaving Jessica with him to tolerate. My old fears started looming, because the last time I tried giving her space and time, she ended her life. I cannot afford to repeat the same with my baby boy, my son. So I tried to act sensible this time and suggested that he goes ahead and opts for marriage counseling so that he could communicate his issues and insecurities effectively. And an expert would deal better with Jessica and her anger issues sensitively. This was the best solution I could come up with. After all, she is my friend's daughter, even if she's not alive. Her daughter is still my responsibility, you know? Being part of our family, Jessica's issues should be ours as well, and we will try our best to deal with them together, but in a healthy manner, not agreeing with her unreasonable demands just like a parent does with their kid. In the evening, Jacob tries to talk to Jessica about what I discussed. I advised Jacob to bring this with her in my presence because she would pay no heed to him. But surprisingly, she agreed for the first time. Happily, Jacob took the appointment, and I doubted what she was thinking. I could not figure it out. On the day of the appointment, Jessica volunteered to drive, and she stopped the car midway and asked Jacob what went wrong and that he needed the interference of an outsider between them. Jacob thought of telling her that his mother is no outsider, but he doesn't want to get late for the appointment, so he just apologizes so they can reach on in time. Update number 4. This is the final post. I was glad that I took the decision because I could certainly witness a big positive change in Jacob's attitude. He got more confident, due to which he learned to speak for himself and refused to make unreasonable demands. He finally learned to say no. Redrawing his boundaries, he stopped getting affected by her tantrums and could recognize her acts. He came out of his shell, started to meet people, reconnect with his old buddies, and bring people home. But Jessica was getting worse day by day. She was trying to regain control of the situation by trying to dominate and get the upper hand. And in desperation, she started creating drama to provoke a few reactions. She accuses him of cheating on her and occasionally threatens to tell everyone about how her unloving husband has been harassing her mentally. But Jacob now stopped reacting. You see, he became thoughtful and tried to respond to the situation, and I was no longer worried for Jacob at this point. But my attention was drawn to Jessica at this time. So I went ahead and I talked to the counselor to give him a few regular updates. About their behavior, and just simply express my concern that Jessica's anger issues were not getting better. Looking at her current reports, he assured me that he would take Jessica for some sessions. Jessica was reluctant to attend the sessions and tried to skip it even, but we could only manage to send her to 2 sessions out of 4. One morning, Jacob went to visit the doctor with me to get her reports, and he told us that she's a psychopath and could get obsessed with anything to any extreme like she has been obsessed with him. He was shocked by the term psychopath, as it's not normal, but doctors said it's due to the lack of empathy. She has an antisocial personality, so there's no assurance that she won't harm someone in the long run, including Jacob. Also, such traits are usually inherited from parents, mainly the father. That evening, we picked up the fight over expenses, and Jacob even refused to be manipulated by her, ignored her, and got up from his table to go to the kitchen. He forgot his phone on the table, and I saw Jessica sneaking into his phone, and I interfered and saw what she was going to do and see exactly what she was up to. She grimaced and put his phone aside, saying it was none of my business, it was between her and Jacob. Well, I snapped back at her to watch her mouth. Jacob, as usual, had no idea, and I taunted her by replying to him. I was reminded her of her manners that she had forgotten after her mother passed, and I went out to take a walk. Jacob tells Jessica he should not behave like this with his mom. Jessica gets so mad at my statement and pulled an entire tablecloth and shattered everything onto the ground. Looking at this behavior, Jacob yelled at her for her actions. She said that he had broken his vows of back-to-backs by bringing his mother in between, and now a counselor? She didn't stop. Out of frustration, she picked things up and started throwing them at him. And when I heard the loud noises from my house, I ran back home and found one of the things had hit him on his head, and he was bleeding. Thankfully, it did not hit his eyes, but I got scared and I called emergency services in an instant. I had to send my daughter-in-law to an asylum when I found out what she did to my boy. While I was trying to control his bleeding, she wreaked havoc upon the entire house. She tore off all the covers and curtains and smashed the crockery and came over to punch him. But fortunately, cops and an ambulance showed up and they witnessed such violence. I talked to the cops and handed them her mental reports, and after that incident, Jacob divorced her. Story 2. I feel like I have to say this, because if I don't, I won't be able to get all the pain and discomfort off my chest. My Harry, the man I was married to for 30 years and loved every single day of my life, has departed to the glory of the Lord. It was a tedious process filled with many tears and suffering from peer to peer, but even though I no longer have him by my side, at least I can see the positive side that he's at peace and resting. I won't go into much detail, but I'll just say that the terror lasted only a fraction of a second, and he would have preferred that over some disease that would have him dying for weeks or months. It's hard for me to write all this because you never know when your loved ones are going to leave you. It may be today, tomorrow, but when you least expect it, they will look at you from a distance, without you being able to do a darn thing about it. That's one of the truths about life, and since it's a truth, it must be a bit painful. From my union with Harry, our little boy was born, and I say little even though he's almost half my age. Gareth, the only son we decided to have and to whom we gave all the love in the world to. Sometimes, even though Gareth himself says otherwise, I feel like Harry was a better father to him than I was. I may have been a bit of a scolder during my son's childhood and adolescence, but it was also I could help and protect him. Today he said that I had a very good upbringing from both of us, and that he loves us in every single way, even though I know that this thought that I'm saying may be present, since it's shown in another aspect of his life, his wife, Ellen. Ellen has been with him for 3 years since they met in a Spanish course. And they made groups for exhibitions and things like that. It was nice at the beginning. But right away, Ellen seemed like a thorn in my son's side. Not in the economic, social, or anything sense like that, but for me. Excuse me if I just changed the subject so abruptly real quick, but now that I think about it, this is also a topic that I must discuss. How my son seems to be a bit against me because of his wife. I guess when they first met, Gareth must have told her about the things that happened in his youth, and it gave the girl the impression that I was a hateful ogre and didn't want to see her son being happy. Nothing's further from reality. With Harry, the story is a bit different. She always smiled and talked to Harry like he was a father to her, but when I came on the scene, the atmosphere became tense. Once during a family dinner, I asked Ellen if there's any chicken salad left. I love a good chicken salad. And she said no. When I returned to the kitchen, I found Harry eating a large helping of chicken salad that had recently been served to him. I asked him, "Hey, Harry, where'd you get that from?" He told me that Ellen had just given him the last of it. If that doesn't say anything to you, I don't know what does. And things like that, well, there's been many more. In all this time that they've been together, I've gone to a couple of meetings together where they do invite Ellen's parents and I don't. I say it because Harry once went, but I did not because I was sick. But it's not my fault either. That makes me feel left out. At this point, I feel like during my funeral, Gareth won't cry and Ellen will even smile. Well, it's a strong thing to say, but you understand that you get a lot of ideas when you're situations like this. And the crudest thing of all is that I have not even done anything bad for the girl. Actually, at the beginning of their relationship, I treated her too well. But this faded as I saw that she underestimated all the effort I put in, which is when I found out that Gareth had told her about his childhood without any filter. So the girl began to see me with bad eyes. Once I made them a meal for their anniversary week and she thanked Gareth out loud, but he even corrected her by saying that I was the one who prepared everything. Well, she just smiled and said, "Oh, thank you," instead of the boast that she said earlier. It's not like I'm doing it for approval or for them to like me, but a sincere appreciation would never hurt. After all, I just want them to be happy, and I must apologize to you and Harry because I started talking about him, and I ended up mentioning my conflicts with my daughter-in-law. What a shame. I hope it just stays as an isolated topic. Well, closing about Harry, I'll just say that I appreciate all the service and help during our time together. I promise to do my best to move forward and just to talk more with Gareth and Ellen, to see if that's how we can settle anything. I would not want the only people I have left to shut me out. It would be like being dead while being alive. And it's a fate I don't wish on anyone. My final recommendation is the same one you've heard your whole life. Enjoy your time with others. Treat them like there's no tomorrow. I love you, Harry, and I always will. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. Today's story is not over. There's multiple updates and we're just getting started. I hope you guys are enjoying your day. If you're new to the channel, just go ahead and click that subscribe button so you don't miss any future updates. Let's jump into update number 1. The sadness of a life gone can only be offset by the excitement of life rising. About 8 months have passed since the physical loss of my Harry, but today Gareth had just given me very good news, and it's that in a few months, his baby will be born. When I heard it, I almost cried with joy, and I ended up wetting the furniture with tears when he told me that if he was a boy, he was going to call him Harry. I gave him a big kiss and a hug, and went back in time to when he was just learning to tie his shoes, something I helped him to do all the time. Surely his father would have loved that news, and as always, the great protagonist of the event, Ellen, well, did not make an appearance as she conveniently went shopping, taking advantage of the fact that she continues in the months, and when she isn't extra weight. Although, if she had been here, it might not have been such a pleasant news to hear. Despite everything, the emotions flooded me, and I hope that everything turns out well. I've been talking to Gareth about all sorts of things, from the baby's name to the college he's going to. Yeah, I can be a bit anxious about that sort of thing. Although, if it were a female, they would name her Gina, like Ellen's mother. This caused me a little bit of jealousy, and I did not want to insist too much. When she told me that her middle name would be like Ellen's grandmother's, I made a somewhat inappropriate comment and said, "Well, and what does one have to do for the baby to have my name?" This made Gareth's expression change to a little more downcast and melancholy. He knew it wasn't quite right or that I'd been offended, but I'm starting to think that's exactly what Ellen wants. Turning me against my son or something, and I hope it's not the same treatment for my granddaughter or grandson when I get out. That's why I want it to be a boy so that I have to avoid the bitter pill. Update number 2. I consider myself a bad person. I've had many flaws in my life and many insecurities. I can even admit that I was not the best mother in the world, but at least I tried. And I say this because of what they've done to me, and I'm bursting into tears for feeling so excluded from the life of my grandson who hasn't even been born. It turns out that Ellen, the woman my son had the misfortune to meet, even if that sounds abrupt, was with me the last few weeks planning the baby shower. Every day looking for decorations, making invitations, contributing ideas of what could be done to the best of our ability so that everything ended in the most bitter scenario of all. Well, I wasn't invited. That's right, as you're reading it, the person who's been the most aware of the state of the pregnancy was excluded from the event that even, brought friends of friends to the celebration. But nothing from the grandmother on the father's side, huh? Well, let me tell you the most cheeky thing. It's that I even helped everything financially. When Harry passed away, the insurance came in to cover his share, and let me tell you, it was not a modest number. I'm planning a lot of things, but one of the biggest priorities is the birth of the baby, little Harry. That's right. They did the gender reveal at the same party, and I swear that a part of me broke with it because I was the one who suggested the most ideas for the event. But I know I'm not alone in this since Gareth did not go to the party either. They're both fighting about it because Ellen decided to do it suddenly and abruptly like she doesn't want us to know what she's going to do. I tell you, that girl is weird. Since she keeps the big thing about her pregnancy to herself, instead of expressing it to those around her, she has an almost pathological need to make me feel small and segregated, to the point where I don't know if she really hates me, or if it's just resentment for the things Gareth said to her, because I'm sure nothing of what, he said to her or did in life can justify this deal. The party featured beautiful decorations, and a cake that even gave everybody in attendance at least 3 servings. Well, an exaggeration maybe, but when I found out, I told Gareth, who said he would talk to Ellen, as that kind of behavior was reaching a limit. When I heard limit, my mind started racing, believing that Gareth already knew his wife's attitude towards me was sour. Now he doesn't want to fully accept it because he didn't know about the party either. Although the girl seems to dominate him by telling him that he was working, so it's useless to tell him to attend. Well, then I thought, what about me? What about the grandmother, the one who was in charge of giving you the money for the event? And who has been on the lookout for the entire process? Me. It just doesn't seem fair, and although I'm speaking in terms of money, the sentimental component is still heavy. For goodness sake, I just lost my husband. It's normal for me to feel bad, and now this little girl's here to take away a ray of sunshine, a new hope that I have to recover a part of me that I've lost and get some happiness. I don't believe it. I don't know if I'll continue to help them financially. But blood is blood, and even if it hurts, I'll continue to try to be the best person in the room. All for my grandson, who I hope does not come to think badly of me, just for trying to love him. Update number 3. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. I think 1,000 times about this, but I don't know how to proceed. Gareth and Ellen are going through a rough financial patch. Ellen's work did not give her disability due to her pregnancy, something that, bothers us greatly, and that's made us reflect on many of the expenses that were planned to be made to bring the baby into the world. We wanted a good hospital, the best care, and the best postpartum treatment possible. but now we have to settle for just the standard. And worst of all, the two of them were saving to buy a house in the burbs. A place where the child can have a quieter family environment without the noise of the hustle and bustle of the city. They'd been planning this since even before Harry passed. And seeing them watching that dream fall apart breaks my heart into 1,000 pieces. I'm considering a few things, and as bold as it sounds for me to say it, considering the history I have with Ellen, since Gareth is still my son and blood is thicker than water, I'm sure Harry would have wanted the same thing. I'm considering helping them with the theme of the new house. They only managed to get up so much of the down payment, but using the insurance money to do it. It would be some kind of gift that both myself and Harry could give them from heaven. It all sounds very nice on paper, but in practice it means running out of almost none of the money. I know my grandson's well-being is more important, so I want to talk to Ellen's family to see if they can support me in any single way. I don't want to be alone in this, and if it comes to a bitter end, then I know I won't be the only one to fall for it. Now, I just need to know how I'm going to tell Gareth the good news. He can be quite stubborn like his father, so maybe he will object when I tell him that I'm going to help them. I must be prepared for any scenario, but I'm sure of one thing. I'm doing the best I can to take care of my family. Update number 4. I still don't know if I've done the right thing. I was talking to Gareth and Ellen, and I wanted to do it in private, but given the circumstances, she had to be there too. And they agreed to the idea. Her eyes even lit up when I told them about covering most of the expenses. Sure, I found it a bit unpleasant given the history she's had with me, but I don't entirely blame her, because if I get that news, I'd be quite happy too. So we started to do the paperwork and treaties so that they can have the new house. Of course, the house that they planned to buy had already been sold, so we started looking for new ones, and well, this time I was able to be part of the integration process, with Ellen even being by my side and seeking my own opinion. Our relationship has significantly improved. We've even shared meals. And it's always brought up how Grandma will be such a big part of the baby's life. What's more, it has been said, or at least I've heard some things about little Harry's previous baby shower. The first one was just a small version of the celebration. Well, according to Ellen, it was just a preparation for something much larger. So I think they want to organize a very big one. If you ask me, that's a bit strange because I previously helped her with many of the things for that celebration that my money was used for, but I think she's making this up to make a new party where both Gareth and I will be participating. It's like a consolation/apology party, but I don't want to be seduced by that idea. If it does get done though, I hope everyone else will put their money into it, not me, because as nice as that concept does sound, I don't plan on giving another penny for it. In itself, I did a lot for them with the house, and I don't want to look miserable because what I'm writing goes more to the side that I don't have money to offer them. If I had, I would. I think by this point you know the most that is Gareth told Ellen that, quote, if something is going to be done, keep it simple because it's already something advanced and there's already been a first party. But the girl's not afraid of abusing a little bit of this because of her friends. I heard her the other day gossiping on the phone about how, and I quote, "Ooh, how everything will turn out great, and it'll be much larger than the first one." You don't need to be an expert to know what she was talking about. Even if I'm a bit withdrawn at the idea of spending more money, at least I'll be there this time. And I'm curious what might happen. I'll be writing you this as everything goes down. Update number 5. Family is a powerful concept, and at least I'm glad to know that I'm not the only one who sees the injustices of this world. I'm going to tell you about my grandson's new and second baby shower. The meeting was in the backyard of Ellen's mother's house. Everything was beautifully decorated. According to previous participants, it was somewhat more significant than the first one. And although they did not give souvenirs or there were large events, at least there were some speeches, games, and talks were quite enjoyable. I was a little late because I was finished baking some fruit cakes. But when I showed up, it was all smiles and dancing on the dance floor. I didn't know people could dance so much at a baby shower, but something horribly happened from the first second, and I didn't expect it at all. Ellen. She started a little flustered, asking me if I've managed to make the cupcakes and if I've brought them or not. I wasn't going to forget the one thing I was supposed to do for the celebration, but I kind of hated the sullen tone for which she said it with, almost sounding like she was scolding me before I even knew the answer. Besides, the muffins weren't even an indispensable part of the celebration since I said I'd make them almost at the last minute. I'm 110% sure that several people around me also noticed the absolute rudeness which she treated me. Because even I could see it on their faces. I saw that one of Ellen's sisters, with whom I don't have much contact with, but she saw her as if she was saying, "Damn, sis, calm down. It's not like you're scolding your mother-in-law like that." And it's the same thing I thought. She was let go, just considering that she must be super hyper hormonal, and would say anything at the moment, and that's when I had a chat with Ellen's sister. She told me no, but she was calm enough to start the party. It was when that she heard that you were coming with the so-and-so cupcakes that she started spitting fire. Well, I avoided saying any comment after that, and it continued with the celebration, speaking with the members of both families left and right. I mostly spent it with my sister, who kept saying the place was beautifully decorated. Some of my discarded ideas from the first party were used, and almost everybody liked it. But every time I saw Ellen, she made ugly faces when pointing out some decorations. That seemed strange to me, since she was the one who decorated everything together with her friends. After that, what I call the recipe for disaster. It happened, and I'm saying this because according to what they told me, she ate one of those cupcakes I made, and automatically when she bit into it, almost without even tasting it, she said they tasted very, very bad. Let's see. What I'll say is because everyone said so, including her family, my son, and of course me. The cupcakes were delicious, period. The matter was unanimous, and it's that even one of her friends tasted the cake to check if there was something wrong with it and said no. That it tasted the same as the rest. Ellen started making a scene, saying that I wanted to poison her, until she escalated to the point of telling Gareth, "That's why your mother always wants to sabotage my celebrations." That was the straw that broke the camel's back. See, for anyone on a different stage, this statement would be enough to cause the entire audience to dislike me. But I feel like a miracle happened that time and everybody turned on Ellen. Immediately, the people around her told her that she was exaggerating, and one of her cousins, the most reckless, but whom I thanked at the time, even said out loud, "If you're like that while pregnant, I can't imagine being a mother. Take care, world." Gosh, this only made Godzilla wake up. Right away, she starts spouting a medley about how everyone was wrong and that in the end, that the party had not been as good as the first. I swear it made me leave and never see anyone again, hide in the biggest hole in the world and just lose myself forever. I even turned around while the girl kept screaming, but immediately someone grabbed my shoulder, my sister, who was quite outraged by everything that was happening. Someone, I think a friend of Ellen's because she was next to her, told her to calm down because she was overreacting to everything because it wasn't my fault that she didn't like the cupcakes and it was the subjective matter that seemingly only affected her specifically. The rest thought that there was no need for such hurtful words and they liked the cupcakes. I didn't know when my tears began to fall. From the moment on, I only listened, because I had my face covered with my hands. I overheard someone say that this party was better than the first because more people came, that the food was better, and that Ellen had not been as cranky as before. There were all points in my favor, but even so, I spent a long time crying. My sister, neither short nor lazy, told her almost at the top of her lungs, which even made me feel sorry, by the way, to, and I quote, "Shut up the dirty sewer that you have as a mouth." I've never seen her so upset, and that's when her mother had to come to the rescue. Well, to my rescue. "Ellen, I can't believe you're treating your mother-in-law in such a mean and cruel way. Do me a favor and apologize to her immediately, miss." At first, Ellen refused, but eventually she began to break down. Her mother continued, "How is it possible that you're so mean to a person who even agreed to pay for your new home? You should be ashamed." If there's a top of the most satisfying moments of my life, this would undoubtedly enter the top positions. The girl was red with rage, and it took her a long time before she understood that she was wrong from the get-go. In truth, she thought that everything had been ruined because of me out of the blue. Unfortunately, she then asked to enter the house, only for the party to slowly lose spirits, and in less than half an hour everything was empty. I was one of the last to leave, and they told me that I would rather put up with a lot for the humiliation that I had suffered. Well, this all happened yesterday, and in a while, Gareth will be here, and soon we can discuss some things according to him. Cannot be over the phone, he said. I'd be lying if I told you that I'm not nervous, but at the same time, I'm not sure that I did not do anything wrong, and that I have nothing to worry about. Update number 6. I'll give you some free advice. Be very careful in what you do for those. They may not be worth it. This sounds fatal, I know, but I'm saying it because even your son can turn against you just for the love that won't give him even half of what you gave him in life. Do you remember that second baby shower my son and daughter-in-law had? The one who was fatal because of her? Well, everyone defended me, and the girl ended up branding as a killjoy. Much to her discontent, it started a lot of arguments in his circle of friends and family, to the point where I had to talk it out with Gareth. And this piece of advice that I'm telling you is due to what he answered me. "Sorry, Mom, but I wanted to know if you could talk to Ellen. She's been very emotional these days, and she feels that a weight's fallen on her with this whole party thing, which we organized precisely for you." As you read it, my son became defensive like the most submissive being in the world, and asked me, his mother, the offended one, to apologize to whoever was at fault. I'm sorry, but I'd rather stay indoors eating poisoned cupcakes. Anyways, it got worse, to the point where Gareth yelled at me and told me to apologize to Ellen. While I talked reason with him, I admit that this discussion broke my heart into 1,000 pieces, and I even wished at one point that I could be with Harry, so that he would see what our son had become. And the saddest thing is that I told Gareth something that came from the depths of my heart. If your father was alive, none of this would have happened, because Ellen did love him. Gareth went blank and began to cry. He felt very sorry and confessed that he was afraid of all this new baby was coming on the way. I caressed him as I used to when he was a child and told him that everything would be alright. He had to trust himself without letting his partner get to dominate him. A week went by without speaking to me. I thought that my advice had fallen empty. And I felt empty during that period, and it was then that a following conversation with one of my friends, to whom I told everything that happened, I had an idea. She told me that she hoped that I would have the opportunity to pay them back for everything they did to me. That made me reflect that I gave them a house. A house. And I know what you're thinking, and yes, I did. I took away the house that I gave them. In the papers, it was shown how I was the buyer of the site since I was the one who gave almost 90% of the money. This hit them like a bucket of cold water, and it's not for less. Seeing the house you've been wanting for so long now crumble before you because of your little tantrum can't be easy. But to Caesar, what is Caesar's? Gareth tried to call me several times. Oh, now he wants to talk. But it wasn't until he got to the door of the house that I decided to talk to him. And let me tell you, I did not have any satisfaction, but I did have a feeling of justice that could not be compared to anything in the world. He begged me, threatened me, and even gave me the reason for everything that happened. But I no longer listened to any more pleas. Now, I only had myself and my new home, which I said I'd sell to the highest bidder, and if they wanted it back, they might as well apologize. Gareth did, but I told him who was the real one to apologize. And you won't believe it, but I'm currently listing the house for sale, and there's already a couple of people who have their eye on it, offering me more than they should. None of them Gareth and Ellen. I tried to be nice and understanding, but when people are mean, there's nothing else you can do. Unfortunately, I don't know if I'll get to see my grandson, but if his father manages to have some remaining intelligence, he might let me meet him in the future. Only time will tell.
Story 3.
My name's Michael. I'm a 61-year-old male, and I have my own business, which I've grown to be very successful. Well, guys, you won't believe this because my sister-in-law, she wants it. She wants every bit of it. She wants the shares, she wants to be the CEO, and she wants me out of here. Well, she didn't do this using hard work or any tactics like that. Oh no! She decided to go a different route, and this route is sickening because she's accusing me of something so ridiculous, so heinous, so toxic that I can't even walk in public without somebody shoving a newspaper in my face saying, "Look at this, you're in the newspaper for being accused of this, but guys, I am innocent, and I'm not going to let someone spoil my name, so I get the best lawyer they have, the best lawyer across all the seas, and I come up with a plan to destroy her, and I am going to do it."
I'm 61 and male, and I'm so unaware of everything that's happening around me that the article that sits in my hand titled, "Silencing the Powerful, Courageous Accuser Steps Forward Against Respected Business Leader," further confuses me with the fact that this is about me. I've been accused of sexual harassment by somebody from within the company. I've been accused of something so heinous, even though I've not done a thing. I'm unsure where to start to make you believe me, so I'll begin with my history. I'm sure you'll trust me because if there's any victim in this entire fiasco, it's me. I must admit that I've lived a comfortable life. My parents were well off when I was born, and by the time I was in my 20s, we were living in a rich neighborhood. My father started the company when he was in his 30s, and by the time I turned 26, the company was already in my hands. From the very beginning, I was clear about what I was supposed to do. I'd been given a direction, and I had to follow through it. No questions asked. To ensure I followed through with expectations, I gave my entire life to the company, and I dedicated all my efforts to the company. It was because of this company that I met the love of my life, Angela. She recently passed away of a massive heart attack, but it was through this company that I've met her. It's for the reason that I continue and consider the company magical. So much has happened because of it, and so many people have found a livelihood because of this very company. This place seems important to me. My only goal has been to maintain this company well even after my death. The only candidate I could find for this same is my son, August, who's 36 years of age. He's shown potential from the very beginning, even as a child. He excelled at topics that I had trouble understanding as a young man. At first it seemed like he would follow through with my steps, and after all, everything was to be his. However, he eventually decided he did not want the company and his interest is somewhere else. I'm still not sure what the interest or passion is. He defends the idea of his passion, but he's never made it clear what stuff he's putting effort into. Regardless, our differing points have created a little tension between us, for certain. No matter how much I try to bridge this gap, it never works out, and ever since he declared that I've been constantly anxious about the company, there are several people I can trust this company on, but I'm not entirely sure they're capable people. Because of that, when my son found a woman to marry, I was the most hopeful about his married life. Emily not only seemed like a nice and lively person, but she was also business-minded. Her knowledge and interest in the working of the business have just always seemed profound to me. In her, I soon found hope for the company, my company. I waited for a long time to understand her passion, and during this time she worked hard just to prove her worth as well. When I suggested starting at a higher point from this company, she refused and solemnly concluded that she would first like to focus on developing herself as per the needs of the company. After that, she would work her way upward. This has the most wonderful effect on me, and as I said earlier, I saw the future of the company inside her. By the time she climbed up the ladder and into the HR department, I was sure she was going to handle the company after me. August has never shown any objection to this idea either, so I always believed Emily to be the safest bet. I admit, I badgered August about the company a lot. That is probably one of the reasons why he just feels so annoyed with me. Since the marriage, I've stopped doing so. Because of Emily, I supposed August feels less pressured by my hopes and wishes, and in my opinion, this has resulted in more understanding between us. Although it took a while, my relationship with both August and Emily has grown better. This change, although subtle, has also helped me cope with the loss of my wife and the inevitable loneliness that comes with old age. I expected it to stay from some time. Instead, this all slipped through my fingers as quickly as it had come. One of the reasons, of course, has been something that I must share with you. Perhaps you'll understand the tension that came soon after my brief reconciliation with my son. Everything was passing on smoothly until I received an anonymous tip stating that something was wrong and happening in my company. However, it was the words potential fraud that made me the most curious. In all years I've handled the company, that has never happened. I did not tell August about it right away, or anyone else for that matter, and I started looking through the files and records myself. It took me some time to understand most of it, and everything seemed so messy to me. It's only been a little more than a week since I discovered the faults within the records, so this accusation against me has only brought a little interruption in my interrogation. A well-timed interruption, if I must say. I was still getting familiar with the ways of the person behind this entire fraud when I was charged with sexual advances, an accusation this morning. I must mention the urgency of this situation, and the fraud has cost my company millions of dollars, but this accusation will cost me my life. Both August and Emily have been in my office since the morning. With how well dressed they look, you would not expect to see such scorn written across their faces. However, all I see is a deep-seated hatred for me and utmost contempt for the fact that I've been accused of something so heinous. Despite my age and my experience, I feel small in front of them. I'm innocent, but they make me feel like I've done something wrong. Perhaps it makes sense that they don't believe me. Though it's also true they don't believe me when I highlighted the urgency behind the potential fraud in the company. I remember talking to both of them over dinner 3 days ago, and I did not know how to begin. Because talking about something so big hurt me, so I blurted out everything at once, and by the time I was done, my wrinkly hands were shaking and I felt wronged. Both August and Emily took their time reacting to the information. When they did, I was disappointed by the lack of intensity in their words. They tried to dismiss this entire idea with a wave of their hands, and they said maybe I should have someone else look at the records. After all, I am old. They implied that maybe, because of my old age and sentiments, I missed several details. Emily even suggested the name of someone in the accounting department, and I was sure I did not know that person. Still, I ate my dinner in silence and vowed to bring the evidence to both of them in due time. I was still gathering my evidence when this entire thing decided to break out. I woke up this morning to the news that I had, hurt some people from the company, and I called both August and Emily over to the office and showed them the article. The article now sits in my hands, and August repeats the words and scoffs at me. He seems absolutely disgusted. In all the years that we have argued about several points, it's only now that I feel completely abandoned by my son. Emily has not said a word, but I know she has much to say. She is a woman too, after all. Although their reactions are valid considering the accusations, I still feel hurt that I don't have either of them standing up for me. If only they showed a little more trust, I would have had the bravery to handle this false accusations with a bit more strength. However, when my secretary knocks on my door and announces the presence of police, I hand myself over to them in silence. They drag me through the office with a little more force than necessary. Perhaps they too hate the idea of someone of my age being accused of sexual harassment. You do lose trust and respect for people like that, right? It all makes sense to me. That's why even though the media people thrust their cameras at me and call me names, I keep my mouth shut. It's only when one of them has screamed something about me having tarnished my father's legacy with my, quote, disgusting habit that I feel hurt. Although neither my son nor my daughter-in-law has come to speak for me during this entire time. I'll update you guys about how it goes for me, and I will prove my innocence, and I will keep fighting for that until my death. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. So today's story is a wild ride, including a business and OP who is accused of something heinous. I have 3 updates for us to hop into, so let's go ahead and jump into the first one. If you guys are new to the channel, hit that subscribe button, guys. It helps support a lot, and I thank you for that. Here is update number 1. How do I begin this? I'll start from the beginning. I was taken in by cops and they asked me so many questions. Through all of that, I just asked for my lawyer and they left me alone for several hours in that little room before coming back to ask me more questions. I refused to say a word. In the end, they called my lawyer, and when he came, I told him everything that I had told them and answered his questions as required. He said he knows I'm innocent, but no one else has the obligation to believe it. Very few people know me, and several people in my position have misused their positioning. It's only natural that very few people will even trust me. The only thing that bothered me about this is that neither my son nor my daughter-in-law are not a part of the little trusting group. He advised me to say only the things that he's suggesting, and I affirmed my understanding. As you can guess, this entire fiasco has resulted in different mishaps. Not only has this ruined my reputation and harmed the company's name, but several employees have filed for resignation. People are making up things about me that I have actually never done. This company is receiving bad online reviews, and several different right groups have been protesting it in front of the company's building. This all makes sense. This is at least that they should happen to someone accused of something like this, but what bothers me is that it's all baseless. I've never touched anyone, except my wife. Angela was the only person I've been with my entire life. To assume my interest ever laid anywhere except in my wife, family, and the company would be so wrong. The only trouble, of course, is how to inform everyone else about my innocence. So, because my case is high profile, it is unfolding very quickly. In the middle of all this, I called for August and Emily, and it's needless to say neither of them has bothered to contact me. When my friends come to visit, I asked if they've contacted my family. They shake their heads. Agitated, I started talking about the company. It's during these conversations that I asked them to look over the financial records and transactions of the company. If they find anything similar like I did, they should inform my lawyer about that immediately, because the timing seems so intentional. Both my lawyer and I have suspected the involvement of the same person who could be committing the potential fraud. My lawyer has often hinted that there could be a direct link between both cases. I've had my suspicions since the beginning, but my lawyer is insisting. He's helping me work on the suspicion more. 2 days later, my friends returned with news. The case is of embezzlement, and my daughter-in-law Emily is at the center of the entire thing. Through my shock and disgust, I listened to my friend and lawyer, and Emily had begun creating fake transactions once they were set in motion. She diverted the company's funds to her own account. Sometimes she made use of unauthorized checks, and sometimes she even did it electronically. She forged signatures, created false documents, and altered financial records to avoid detection. Because the sums were not too large, it worked out for her. But after a while, when she realized that she was moving undetected, with the help of some other people, she created a fake employee profile. These, quote, people were getting paid for doing nothing. In reality, all the funds were shared by her and the people she was working with. If not for the internal audit that I asked the day before the accusation was filed against me, we would not have found this out. What's more is, the next thing I find out is that Emily is one of 3 women who has filed this case against me. I now understand why she was so silent and dismissive when I discussed the topic with her. It also makes sense why she was reacting so oddly when she met me in the morning. I'm going to be brutally honest with you guys. I've never done or said anything to Emily in all the years I've known her. I've only treated her as my daughter, and I've always been the most sure that she's a perfect spouse for my son, and I've always held the greatest admiration for the person and perseverance. The fact that she did so much and filed a case against me as such is not only heartbreaking but a wrongful act too. Did she do all this just to save her name in front of the world and August to protect herself? Have I made her feel uncomfortable? However, even August's behavior seemed a bit off to me. His reactions were almost similar to Emily's, and the only difference was that he thought he was guarded. He was more open about showcasing his emotions. Are both of them equally involved in this? Feeling devastated, I ask all 3 of them to leave me alone for a while. This is, I have realized, too much to take in, and I'm not sure what the steps I'll take next are, but I will keep you updated about everything that is to come. Update number 2. Ever since I found out the truth, my fight to prove my innocence has become more vigorous. I have to face several rights groups, and I have to deal with the general bashing of the press. But it does not make me lose hope that someday I will get my justice. In this entire struggle, I see so little of August and Emily that the rift that I believe has ended has come alive again. I feel angry. I feel backstabbed. I don't know why either of them did what they did, but I mostly do not understand August. It is indeed true, the passion lies somewhere else, but what reason could he have to hurt his father like this? I mean, he's planned this with Emily, hasn't he? I have so many questions. I'm sure this is enough to make a sane man go crazy, and it takes a long time and many brutal, insulting questions before I even see hope for myself. Under much pressure and a potential case against himself, one of the 3 women breaks down first. She admits to having lied after Emily's suggestion. They still have to reveal why that suggestion was made in the first place, however, I knew. I already knew. Even so, at my lawyer's suggestion, I kept silent, and I'm also not sure if Emily was the only one who planned this entire thing, but I take a little interest in discovering the factor of this false accusation. A lot of damage has already been done. August seems a little surprised by the revelation. I realize perhaps not the entire way then, because my emotions waver a little. I approach him with those feelings, thinking perhaps I would be able to salvage something from this. However, he ignores me. When the case is adjourned for the day, he immediately runs for Emily, and I watch him try to console her, despite knowing full well what she's done to his own father. Well, it hurts me. Perhaps my lawyer was right when he said they deserve each other. It is then that I realize I've lost the both of them, and perhaps I should accept that I'm going to die without either by my side. The final ruling takes a while to come. During the wait, both my lawyer and I sat down to discuss how to approach the situation after this. We have every reason to believe things will be in my favor, so the planning takes little emotion and more legal approach, and my friends ask if I want to do something against August too, but nothing can be done against him without any evidence. The funds are transferred to Emily's account, and, well, without any evidence, I don't know. Never to August's account. Even if August has done something, we will have a hard time proving it in court, and we eventually decide on Emily first. If there's anything she wants to disclose about August, she will do that herself. The day the court announces me innocent should have been joyful, right? But it isn't. Sure, yeah, a weight has been lifted from my shoulders that was so cruelly shoved onto me, but I am just glad that it's over. I've lost almost everything I've known in the past few months. How could anything be joyful after that? The only good thing is that I can finally do something about Emily. The article that now sits in my hands is titled, "Justice Prevails. Respected businessman exonerated in false sexual allegations of assault." Is that so? Perhaps not, and the public will soon know why. With the help of an attorney, I charged and sued Emily for fraud, defamation of character, and malicious prosecution. False sexual harassment charges will never look good on your character. And Emily and the other two women are going to find that out. There's little need to take pity on them, too, and all three women are in their late 30s and have come from well-off families. The fact that they would resort to something like that already makes them look bad. Although the tide has changed, the media tries to eat them just like they did to me, and I'm not saying it provided me satisfaction because as an old man, you don't want to see younger people suffer, but it was deserved. I've given so much of myself to see both Emily and August happy, and they in return have cared little for the value of it. Perhaps all of this will teach them, and I hope it teaches both of them something because all of this has taught me a lot. All in all, in the little moment I got to talk to Emily after she was proven to be guilty, well, all I asked her was why she did that to me. Her face just immediately took a cruel expression, and I realized she does not feel bad about it at all. The only thing she feels bad about is that she got caught. According to her plans, I should not have been proven innocent, and her intention was for me to be proven guilty and given a long life sentencing. The company would have eventually belonged to her. August never wanted anything to do with the company anyway, so it was a win-win situation for them. She just shrugged her shoulders and went her way, and after that I never talked to her again. I just felt sorry for her. Perhaps I should not have felt that way, though. August, on the other hand, has accepted his involvement with Emily, and he continued that it is true that he did not know about Emily's plan about filing such a case against me, but he, quote, did not care when he found out it was a lie. I could not understand how he admitted that. It seemed so careless to me. He was not sorry he hurt me. It had the deepest effect on me, and I have to be honest, I feel more hurt about the admittance from anything else. I asked him, why would he do this to me? Why? He didn't have a legible answer, and nothing that he said was proper and reasonable enough to commit fraud on such a grand scale. If he needed money, he could have always just asked me. He has never done that, and I swear on that, and it's always going to bother me that none of the money he spent on whatever he did wasn't even his to begin with. While Emily and he enjoyed themselves with the money, the rest of the company worked hard. Unknowingly, all of our employees were working hard to pay for their amusement, and yes, it makes me so upset. When I realized during this entire thing I failed my employees, I took it to public to announce my final decision. August accompanied me after I convinced him, and I told him we need to address this issue as we are the representation of it. I even said that he does not need to be in front of the camera because the center has always been me. By this time, Emily has already spent 3 weeks behind bars, and she has not apologized to me even once. Maybe that's another proof that she doesn't feel guilty at all. She had a purpose, and that was to fulfill whatever fantasies both she and August had, and now, sometimes, when my friends crack up with a joke that now she'll fulfill her fantasy behind prison, I laugh along. I don't mean to, but sometimes I do. Anyways, let's go back to the present now. I took it to the public and finally addressed the issue. At the end of the questions answering session, I addressed the most important point of this entire meeting, the future of my son August. I began with how my wife and I raised August, and how his passion and my differing opinion on his future created a rift between us, and how when Emily came back the relationship mended a little, but then all hell broke loose when I received the anonymous tip. In the middle of that, I announced his involvement in the fraud, and to say the media went berserk would be an understatement. I ended my speech by announcing that I've disowned August and I have no relation to him anymore. To say August's face was something to look at. The next morning, when I received my daily newspaper, I knew long before I saw the main page what would be the headline. The actual one seemed the closest to what I had in mind. Fallen from grace. Businessman exposes son's fraud and publicly disowns him, and I shall come back with another update in due time. Thank you for listening. Update number 3. This is the final update. I have to begin with my company since it's gone through a tremendous upheaval since the entire thing began. Several employees have left the company, many more are in the process of leaving, and there are chances that some of them, some of the ones who are left may not be as loyal anymore. The company has lost nearly all partnership, and the market value has absolutely crashed. And there are a few people or companies who want to associate with us. I have indeed been proven innocent, but the fact that I was accused in the first place of something like that, it's going to haunt me for a very long time. With a few people, I try to rebuild my reputation, and we're starting campaigns. I attended more conferences, meetings, and sessions, just to talk about the situation to create a bit of an awareness about it. Although some things heal, people still keep their distance, and we open doors for noobs. Keep an open mind about who to employ, and even promised increased pay, but it all seemed to do very little. In the middle of this, weeks after I disowned August, he contacted me 3 times, and all 3 times he has tried to reason with me that he is ready, to take over the company after me, but I refused. I mean, let's be honest. I know he's not here for sincere concern for the company. From what I've heard, he's having a hard time keeping up with his livelihood. It was to happen. August never worked for a day in his life, not once. All he did was follow his passion and even neglected his studies. Besides, his lack of education background, despite coming from such an affluent family, and his name is forever tarnished by the mere fact that he was involved in millions of dollars worth of fraud in his own company. What sane company would want an employee like that? Even if I don't want to sound the way I know I will sound when I say this, August has brought this upon himself. Even though we have all gone our ways and found different futures ahead of ourselves, I will always wonder where I failed and why these two ended the way that they did. Something went wrong. I'll spend my remaining life rebuilding not only the trust of people lost in me, but also wondering what made the situation so bad that old August and Emily had to go on and commit something like that.
Story 4.
I'm in a situation that gives me goosebumps. Long story short, I've had a strained relationship with my daughter-in-law for as long as I've known her. Our thoughts are radically different, and sometimes I even think my son sought her just to annoy me, as a sort of revenge on me, although nothing could be further from the truth. I get along very well with my son, and I would dare say that the upbringing I gave him was excellent, so imagine my face when he comes home with a girl with green hair, several piercings, tattoos, and a personality as outlandish as today's pop singers. She always objects to whatever I say and refuses to talk things through. just as I refuse to try to understand all the justification she makes for any simple things in this life. Though I have thought that she was against it. Anyways, she works for an NGO. An NGO that specializes in dealing with older people, and I know that she's talked to my son about certain things, about her job. She's a specialist in denigrating older people, I'll tell you that. I know that deep down she thinks we're useless and deserve to disappear prematurely from society. You don't know how much I wish I was lucid enough to see this day when she too would go through that ravages of age. And she has talked to my son about leaving me in a retirement home, to be with my, quote, peers, even though I have a desire or need to be in such a place. I mean, I have nothing against those places. They're quite necessary for families who need their older members to have more private care, but I'm still in a position to enjoy another decade by my son's side, and even to be able to help them with any grandchildren they may want to give me. Although being her, I'd like there to be no grandchildren involved. The problem here lies, realizing that I haven't told you yet, is that my son has just left for a trip to a country in Africa. I can't quite remember which one, and I'm left alone with my daughter-in-law. Let's see. We haven't often lived alone together on our own. But now that we'll have to for almost a month, and we've barely been here a week, and I can't stand being here anymore. Even considering going to one of my sisters, though they live in another state, hours away from here. Apparently, we cannot communicate with my son except through an internal network that only the organization where my daughter-in-law works has access to, so she only talks to him when she's at work, and meanwhile, I have to endure at home worrying about my son receiving any news about him through his wife, who sometimes only limits herself to, "He's fine," or "Nothing interesting happened." My son is in another continent, for God's sakes. I need to know more details about how he is, not a "he's fine." Not only if he's alive or not. I've tried to talk to her about it, but nothing. It's like talking to a wall. That's why I've decided to come and tell you guys about this, because I don't have anyone else to speak to. It's very frustrating because of the lack of empathy in the situation. For somebody who works with older people, this woman does not have the slightest sense of helpfulness. I can't conceive of the fact that she has that job, and I've gone so far as to overstep the line of, if it makes my son happy, I'm happy. Update number 1. This is beyond outrageous. I'm writing to you guys from a retirement home as I was brought here against my will. All thanks to Miss Daughter-in-Law of the Year. First, she denied me information about my son who was on a trip. Second, she told me that they've both decided to put me in a retirement home since my son's trips are going to be more frequent from now on, and they want to, quote, me to have the care I deserve, as if I were somebody with some special condition, which I'm not. Imagine being at home like any other day and suddenly being told others have decided to move you. Don't you think you would feel terrible? Now imagine that some of the people who made that decision were not even present to tell you, and to be told by a person who you almost could be said you hate. With a situation like that, I should not be taken to a retirement home, but to an insane asylum, because I will stop in madness at any moment. My son has given me no sign of life, and now I'm finding it much more difficult just to contact him. The last I heard from him the day they moved my things to this place was that his trip might take longer than he thought, so I could go a whole season here without hearing from him. That's what hurts me the most. To be honest, I've asked for help in contacting my son, but I still fall into this miscommunication thing that only allows my daughter-in-law to be the one to hear from him. On the other hand, if I start thinking about the retirement home, I have mixed opinions. Let's see, I never imagined myself in a place like this. In my family, we have the fervent belief that parents and grandparents should remain united to the family until the end, because we always have a good health or a member who can take care of the others. The one who poisoned my son's head was that woman, his wife, who hardly knew his grandfather because he was left in such a place since she was little and spent his last years there alone. I don't want the same fate. The place is brilliant, although sometimes the sweet smells can be a bit repulsive. I am one of those privileged ones who get a few hours in the morning to go out to the courtyard for fresh air, but since I've arrived, it's only happened about 3 times, as we're in the rainy season, and we're not allowed to do that. As far as meals are concerned, they're okay. I don't have much to complain about, except for the salads, which somehow managed to make them taste bland, as if it's the rotten lettuce. They lack of touch, salt, which is forbidden in very high doses for some tenants, and therefore we all pay for it. I've talked to people in the complex, and they all tell me that being there is not as bad as it seems, but I've made friends with a couple of ladies and a man who say that they're going through a similar situation to me. It fills me with so much regret when they tell me how their families threw them in there as if they were nothing, just a waste of air, and that at literally any moment they could die away from the people they lived in a lifetime with, surrounded by strangers. That could be soul-crushing for anyone. Sure, they are much older than I am. There are more than a couple of residents who are already over 100 years old, and one of them is the saddest case, as his family has not visited him in about 8 months. But it's still not what I'm aiming for in my golden years. I haven't even been able to hold my grandbaby in my arms. I asked the nurses to notify me when my son comes home, as they make a weekly call to check on my family. In other words, for 7 days I was adrift as to how my son was doing and did not even think that my daughter-in-law would come to visit me of her own free will. I managed to get access to the internet to write these things, telling them that I use writing as a way to release tension, let off steam, and because it's been my hobby for years, they still tried to get me to switch to pencil and paper. But considering the problems arthritis could bring, it's better if I just stick to the method I was most comfortable with, behind the keyboard. Update number 2. Hello, I hope you're all doing very well. I'll get straight to the point, as this is the only way I can purge my emotions. I've begun at this age, God blessed me, to experience depressive symptoms as a result of what's going on. I may be a part of a bigger plot by my daughter-in-law, who wants to get rid of me one way or the other. I've not even written again for fear that it'll create more depression. The nurse tells me that my son is still not back, and it's been more than a month and a half. Although I've recently received some curious news, such as my daughter-in-law showing up from time to check on me, which I find strange since she may call to see how I'm doing as well. Also, I discovered something recently, and that is that one of the residents managed to see my daughter-in-law and recognized her from a year ago since her daughter works in a clinic, but I did not quite understand what the whole thing was about. Since, as far as I remember, the biggest eventuality was that my son got diarrhea after eating some seafood on a trip to the beach, but other than that, we're all in good health, so I don't understand what she was doing at the clinic. I may ask her about that later. What I'm interested in now is getting back in touch with my son. I have not even been able to talk to my sisters either. I feel like I'm in some kind of prison, and that at any moment I will stop in madness even before, well, my time. Update number 3. I am writing this a day after the last update. I'm fainting from shock. This, I will tell, remains a big secret, but one that I must take advantage of in my situation for the future. With much regret, I must say that my daughter-in-law has had an affair with another man. A nurse at the clinic, that this affair has lasted almost more than a year, but with somewhat unpleasant consequences. Not only did she sully the union that she had with my son, but she ended up pregnant by her lover, in a season that I'm gradually remembering. Last year in the middle, around July to August, my son and she used to have some strong arguments, which he would sometimes share with me for advice. Of course, on almost every occasion, my solution would be for him to get rid of her. But it's not like he was just going to leave his marriage just like that. But had I known this fact, things changed. Now I understand the reason for this time of conflict. I don't know, nor do I care to know, when it all started, but from what this lady tells me, it's all going on. She knew about it because her daughter works at the clinic where apparently my daughter-in-law not only met the guy that she's secretly dating, but it was there that she had, gotten rid of the baby a few months after being pregnant. The woman who told me all this sometimes used to visit her daughter at the clinic, and there she saw my daughter-in-law seeing that nurse guy. It was such that the relationship was an open secret within the clinic, and it's believed that getting rid of the baby was performed there, with the help of other members of the medical staff. Of course, this kind of information has yet to be confirmed, as it's taken time with a pinch of salt due to its sensitivity. I may even be a part of another older women's senile dementia and not know it. Still, whether it's true or not, I have to discuss it with my son, as it would be too much of a coincidence if it were not. The problem is getting out of here so I can contact him. I have to find a way to be able to live freely for at least a day. Either that or I contact someone else like my sister. The internet access we have is very limited, and I can't do it through this page because of the security and policies. Yeah, it's a shame. Social networks are forbidden, which complicates the task quite a bit. But anyways, I can't help but think that this deception may come to hurt my son more and more, and that's why he deserves to know. I mean, how long would that woman pretend to see his dumb face? I may sin as a gossip, but I would do that and more to be able to be with my son again. What's more, it would even feel like a well-deserved revenge. I've always said it. God works in merciful and righteous ways for the good, because I feel that everything is to achieve justice. First, I should mention that none of this would have been possible if not done something naughty before, and that is I borrowed, slightly without consent, one of the photos of the caretakers of the retirement home, where I was able to dial the only number I knew, which was that of my old home. And I say God is great and mighty because I got an answer from none other than my son. 2.5 months since I last saw him. I quickly told him where I was and to come and get me ASAP, but without telling his wife. He was very, very confused, and more so because I told him that I did not have much time to talk to him. He panicked just thinking about what would happen if his wife had answered, or if no one answered. I hung up and left the phone in the woman's purse, leaving as if nothing happened. I was in her office talking to her, but she went out for a moment, leaving the phone on the table, which was when I took the opportunity to pick it up. But not before deleting the call history. It was perhaps the most technological detective-esque moment I've ever had in my life. In just half an hour, the longest half hour of my life, my son showed up, worried and making a fuss inside the facility. When they let me see him, he ran to hug me, and that's when we started talking. He heard everything that happened, and I knew everything that happened. Apparently, he had been back in the country for about a month, and since then, he had been wondering what happened to me. It turns out my daughter-in-law, his wife, that harpy, had told him that I was indeed in a retirement home, but that I was in no condition for visitors. She used her knowledge and influence from the organization where she worked to put together an elaborate plan to keep my son and me apart. It seems to have worked quite well because for a month I thought my son was not in the country, and my son thought I was not in a position to see him. He told me that he cried several nights in regret for not treating me better or whatever, and that's when I told him not to apologize because there was someone to blame for all of it. It was a moment of revelation, where he finally realized what kind of person his wife was, but the story doesn't end there. It was then I told him that the whole thing about his cheating wife and the, getting rid of the baby issue, I had to say it carefully so as not to hurt him too much. Until the last second, I was hesitant whether to mention it to him or not, because the thought for a whole month that his mother was in a bad state was horrible in itself. Now he had to face the bombshell of this information, and he came to take those words with caution, but the more he thought about it, the more he understood that it all made sense. Because of some things I did not know about to happen last year, he told me about them, and now the infidelity issues made more sense. So, we had to see how we could act from now on, and first my son said he wanted to confirm some things, so he went to the clinic to corroborate about losing the baby. Of course, that was very risky, but as I told you at the beginning, everything is perfect in God's puzzle. I say this because when my son went, arriving almost on the run, he asked for his wife's records, but there was nothing in the site's history that could assure him that it had indeed happened. Devastated, my son was on site asking the staff about it, but everyone kept telling him the same thing, that doing that kind of practice was not only illegal, but could put the clinic itself at risk. But then a nurse showed up and asked my son's name, and when he told her, she pulled him to the side. Well, it was then he told her everything. Absolutely everything, about getting rid of the baby and his wife's history of infidelity. He told her all this because some time ago she went out with my daughter-in-law's doctor lover. But he rejected her because he was with my daughter-in-law, precisely. And that was why she had to put up with the playfulness that they both had, is that she knew about getting rid of the baby. Well, being a Clandestine operation around here that few even knew about, she was celebrating that she could finally tell someone, as she had kept the secret for the whole year, but the appearance of my son was proof enough to say it out loud. Only my son did not take it well. He started to make chaos in the compound, and security had to get him out because, well, if not, something serious would have happened. I know this because the lover appeared out of nowhere in the hospital, even though he had the day off, and when my son saw him, it was hatred at first sight. On my side, I'm still in the retirement home, since my son told me, with all the shame in the world, to say, well, I need to stay here at least another week. Because he was going to talk to his wife about the whole thing, and I don't know how it'll turn out, but I hope I can come out of this okay. How do I take all this? Well, as I once said, it's a divine justice, and a mother's eye is never wrong. So when I told my son that this woman gave him a bad feeling, the best thing to do was to listen to me, to avoid all this conflict. But now we're at this point where I spend my nights thinking about what new update my son will have regarding his problem. Suddenly, sleeping here now has become a little more comfortable, knowing that my days in this compound are numbered. When I told the lady who revealed to me the truth about what happened, she asked if at any point I had named her, but I told her no. And what's more, that my son was not going to mention names during the entire story, neither mine nor the nurses who ended up confirming everything to him. As a side note, I will only comment that I don't have much time left in this place, as my son promised me that whatever the outcome was, he would be looking for me next Saturday to return home, and that hopefully his wife is no longer there. Whether he has forgiven her, or if it's all turned out to be a lie, or if she managed to manipulate him again, I'm staying here to live, partly because of the shame of having such a weak son. Although, I know that won't happen because for the first time, I saw him quite determined, and those are not the kind of things that you can just let go of so freely. I made some really good friendships here, and I might get to visit them. Sure, I don't think this is my place for now. The only thing I think is there's a divorce involved. Then the chances of having a grandchild on the hands are pretty slim. I just don't want to think about it anymore. Obviously, what I want most is peace and well-being for my son, and for the woman to pay for everything that she's done to me. Update number 5. Tonight, I feel more alive than ever. Arthritis you can go to, where. I did the craziest thing in my entire existence, and I got to savor the best revenge I've ever seen. Even better than movies. You see, it's been about a month since my last update, and I thought I'd leave it at that, but what happened deserved to be told. Well, my son filed for divorce, and my now ex-daughter-in-law agreed to it. They signed the papers, and we all thought that was the end of it, right? Only, it was not. My ex-daughter-in-law somehow, in her complex, made up a strange story about my son inside the company where he works, and almost caused him to lose his job. At first she denied everything, but as we learned more about it, the more we noticed that she was the culprit, and more people corroborated. She made it all seem like it was just a mild comment, but I knew the repercussions it would have for my son's job, and that's why I was reckless again. You may say, oh, but this old lady is too nosy, and she says she's a saint. But when I see injustice in this world, I have to do something about it. That's when I had an idea. You see, every year before the December dates, there's an event at my ex-daughter-in-law's organization. There they all go dressed up and have a photo shoot and even press coverage. Speeches are given, shoulders are patted for, quote, excellence of the year and good honest work. Only now I would weigh in on this. Several organizations would be present, and amongst them my son's company, who invited me as his plus one since this year's scandal. He had separated from his wife. Just so you know, I plan to talk to someone in a high position in the organization about my son's situation, to make him look good since it was bad that he would be harmed by these rumors. Anyways, I was very hurt by the fact that he looked bad for everything that happened, and even more so because of the use of cell phones was forbidden at the scene since it's something private. Even the press was limited to the classic pencil and paper in hand to record everything. There were going to be about 10 speakers who would talk about the usual visions, missions, objectives of each organization. But amongst them was going to be the woman in question. Look, I'm going to be honest, I wanted to talk to someone high up on the event. But when that woman started to say what she said, I got mad. She started to give a speech that deviated from the stipulation from how much her organization had accomplished. She now went on to how it was, quote, a pretty rough year for her because of her family situation, and she wanted to remind everyone that sacrifices at work are very well appreciated and thanked. I may be many springs old, but at no time I'd ever seen a viler, more hypocritical person say such outrageous things. It was then she was still going on with the speech, which revolved around her and her husband abandoning her or something. That something clicked in my mind, and I stood up. And I stood up from my seat in the room at the event and yelled, "Liar!" And it seemed as if the whole atmosphere had been devoured by a black hole. There was a spectral silence, and almost immediately she asked security to get me out of there. That only played against her. Since that's when you knew something was wrong, people started shouting that they wanted to know more about it, perhaps because of the morbid gossip, and that's when, in my best mom voice possible, I said, "You talk about dedication and hard work despite family situations, but you don't say you cheated on your husband? My son?" Precisely, my son tried to stop me at first, but after it was mentioned to him, he preferred to see where it was going. I feel that deep down he wanted me to talk, and I was more than furious that there was no cell phones to record the affair. Still, we saw later that the people who were worth watching the fuss were in the same room. Summary of what ended up happening. There was a loud argument that concluded with Miss Goodness succumbing to annoyance, and she ended up saying something she should not have. I won't say it in detail so as not to offend susceptibilities, but I'll just say that she insulted me by saying I should stay in the retirement home with other, quote, old people. Only she did not use such nice terms, let's just say. And that shocked the people in the room. I mean, I planned to talk to someone so that she would get hurt, not knowing that she would be setting herself up for her own demise. She was booed, and my son and I comfortably left the area. We went back to the house and I started writing this. Of course, I paused a bit because he told me that apparently the board of his company was talking about starting an investigation into his ex-wife, since such was the display of anger he showed that his organization began to suspect that something was wrong. That, and added to what she did to me by sending me to the retirement home, maybe the investigation, unsuccessful or not, will end up in a lawsuit against her. And that would make me very, very happy, because only then would she pay for everything she did to us. The truth is that I do feel a bit bad, but only because I have no audio-visual record of the event, because it would surely go viral on the internet, as it usually does. Tomorrow, I will go shopping with my son, and I feel that now I can do it more calmly than before. If he finds a woman like that, I won't hesitate to put my spoon into the matter.
Story 5.
Hello everyone, my name's Abby. I'm new to this website, so please excuse me if I'm doing something wrong. I'm a mother of 2 sons, Derek and Samuel, 30 and 23. My eldest Derek is getting married to this seemingly sweet and kind girl, Ellison. They've been dating since they were in college, and she's been over to our house during holidays a few times. Recently, they asked me to help them pay for their wedding, and I thought that I would help them out as I have put aside money for both my sons' weddings. I knew Ellison before the engagement, and we met a couple times before the wedding for wedding preparations, and I really liked that girl and approved of that marriage. Another incident happened a few days ago. About a week before Derek and Ellison's wedding, my youngest son came out as gay, and my family, and I'm Christian, but I'm not against it or rigid for that matter. I try to respect everybody's choices of being who they are, even though I don't broadcast it. Unfortunately, I wasn't raised that way. However, when my son told me about his choice, I was a bit taken back. Samuel's always been a very strong, boyish boy, and my eldest son tells me that those are no longer the traits of a straight man anymore, and it can be offensive. I'm going to change how I think about these things going forward from now on. So, When he came out to me, I tried to be supportive. And the truth is, I am supportive. I just needed time to wrap my head around the fact that my kid is gay. I soon realized it wasn't a big deal. He was still Samuel. Instead of a girlfriend, he would bring home a boyfriend. I accept that. My Samuel is very strong on the outside. He loves going to the gym and staying fit, but he can be very sensitive on the inside. He's very introverted and overthinks a lot, which usually leads to a bunch of anxiety and stress. I don't want my son to feel that way in regard to how his family viewed him after he came out, so I immediately reassured him that I loved him and respected him, and the same as he did before. I told him that I loved him and nothing was going to change that. I've always been very close to both my sons, and they've been my whole world ever since they were born, and their well-being has always been my top priority. In this situation, I knew that he needed my reassurance and support the most, so I gave that to him. I think that really helped him settling himself, and my eldest son even made some jokes to make Samuel feel normal, just like he used to tease him about girls, just this time with boys. You see, both of my sons have a little bit of an age gap between them. However, Derek has always been protective of his little brother. Oftentimes, he knew how to get Samuel when I couldn't. They have been this way since Samuel's birth, and Derek used to take care of his younger brother while I was away at work sometimes, or if there was any issue with the babysitter. So I think his eldest brother accepted him and joking with him like it was all normal, making him feel more comfortable. The day after Samuel came out, I organized a small family dinner. It was just me, my husband, my 2 sons, and my future daughter-in-law. I just wanted a quiet, peaceful dinner before Derek and Allison married. I didn't think my daughter-in-law would be against my son being gay. She was so kind and soft-spoken, and of course, that doesn't mean that people like this can't be evil. But before this dinner, I had not thought that way at all. I was still going to be changing my mindset in regards to this. The dinner was going well. My husband Samuel and Derek were talking about a football game or something, and I liked that Samuel was coming out of his shell after not talking much the day before, just after he had come out to us. On the other hand, Ellison kept me company. During the dinner, Derek made a gay joke about Samuel to lighten the mood in regards to him, and Ellison overheard the comment. However, Ellison's reaction to the joke was very, very unexpected. Ellison told her fiancé not to joke about that, stating that she can't tolerate such people, rendering the whole table speechless. My husband and Derek looked at me and, just to tell me that what should we do in such an uncomfortable situation, while Samuel kept looking down at his food, not making eye contact with anyone. I didn't want my son to have to hide himself from anyone ever in his life. Samuel deserves to live with his head held high, even though, there's somebody at the table who did not agree with him, and I intended to show him that I thought that he had every right to do what he wanted. Hence, I told Ellison that Samuel came out as gay to us the day before, and she immediately stood up. She flung her cutlery on her plate without regard to anyone or anything, which really made me mad. She told Derek to stop living in this house and get out. Derek and Ellison had recently bought a house together, and they were to move in there in just a few days. Hence, Derek has been living with us for the past few weeks. Ellison was living with her own parents before their lease began on the new house, and I could not believe she could talk like this to the people who was so generously helping them get settled. Ellison told Derek to stay away from people like us, and that she could not be around us either. She explained that she was brought up in a very religious household and community, and because of being raised in an extremely religious household, she and Derek can't live around people like us. So I was beyond angry at this woman who treated my son with disrespect in my house. So I stood up and told her to leave. I said that no one like her was allowed at my dinner table, and disrespect me or my family will not be tolerated. Ellison grabbed Derek's arm and led him out the door. I shut the door immediately when they were gone, beyond angry at Derek for not taking a stand for his younger brother. I hoped that he would talk to his future wife in regards to what's acceptable behavior at someone else's house, or not expect us at their wedding at all. I still can't believe that woman's audacity. On one hand, she has no issue accepting money from me for her wedding, and then she can't even pretend to respect me and my family in my own home. Shameless woman, I tell you. I hate such people. Religion is not an excuse to be disrespectful and crappy human beings to others. And I've decided that I will no longer be paying for the wedding of theirs at all. And, well, Derek better talk to that senseless woman if she expects that I'll be paying for any sort of marriage. For that matter, I actually disapprove of this union. Not that I would say something like that to my son, it would be highly inappropriate, I know. However, their wedding's just a few days later in the evening, and neither of them has called me to apologize. I was supposed to make the payment for the venue a few hours before their actual marriage, but I'll no longer be doing so. Let them scramble. My family and I would not be attending the wedding either. Even my siblings and my husband's siblings have agreed to not go to the wedding without our prompting to do so. Well, I did talk to Samuel. He just told me to get over it. He claimed that he did not care what Ellison thought anyways. However, I think it's very much mattering to me. If she or her future husband can't stay with a family who accepts their son for who they are, I can't attend or pay for a wedding for someone who is like that. I'm writing this because I'm just so angry. I know I'm doing this right, and I don't give a rat's butt if they get married tomorrow or not. I stood up for my son, and that's what every parent's responsibility is. Update number 1. Hey guys, it's Abby again. Today was my eldest son's wedding. However, my close family and I did not attend because my future daughter-in-law is against my son being gay and disrespectful towards me and my family. I did not show up at my son's and his fiance's wedding with my family, and neither did I pay for the venue like I promised that I would. The venue required me to pay the second half of the money before the wedding, and because I did not pay the next installment, they did not allow Ellison and Derek to progress with the ceremony until they paid the rest of the payment. I had many missed calls from Ellison a few hours before the ceremony, but I ignored them like she ignored her manners when she created a scene at my home. I could not ignore her for so long as she showed up at my house, though, just an hour before the ceremony in her wedding dress. She was very, very angry and threw the bag that she was carrying right at me. It was just me and my son at the house at the time, and she starts throwing all these slurs at me and Samuel, and I sent my son inside so I could deal with the shameless woman alone in peace. Ellison actually accused me intentionally of ruining her special day. I agreed and told her that I did indeed intentionally ruin her special day, after she intentionally disrespected and tried to ruin my son's self-esteem by being a jerk at the dinner. Ellison told me that it had nothing to do with what I actually did. She claimed that I was jealous that my son chose her over me. That's why I did that. Well, you know what, guys? I just straight up laughed in her face and told her that Derek was old enough to decide what he wanted to do, and I stated that the real reason why I did not pay for the wedding of a woman who does not respect me or my family is because she, just that, doesn't respect me or my family. I mean, simple. I claim that if Ellison being religious makes her not tolerate gay people, then I can't tolerate her either, and you know what? She should just go ahead and leave. And, well, she gave me a hearty laugh, and then she threatened me. She said that she would actually make me regret ever messing with her. I reminded her that it was 2023, and I would be just waiting to see her embarrass herself all over again. Well, that ended up not getting married that day. They're postponing their wedding to a date when they can actually afford to have the wedding. So, which would be not anytime soon, because they have no savings after they put down the payment on their new home. My son has not called me even now. I am disappointed in him, of course. I won't force him to stand up for his younger brother, but I'm allowed to feel disappointed in his behavior. Anyways, both Ellison and Derek were humiliated after the guests showed up, but the venue did not let them enter because they have not paid yet. I'm sure that they must have invited their work friends, and they would have been very embarrassed for them. They deserve it, especially Ellison. Update number 2. Hello everyone, Abby is on this side. After that day, Ellison came home, my house in a wedding dress, and threw all these slurs at me and my son's face. Well, guess what? She showed up again. She just straight up demanded that I fulfill my end of the bargain and pay for the venue. I told her that I would do so if she asked my son for forgiveness and then apologized to me and my husband for being disrespectful at dinner. Well, she claimed that she had only shown up as a warning, claiming that I was forcing her to take the next step by not complying. I told her that she just wasted mine and her own time by doing so, and that she should leave. That incident took place a week ago, and since then Ellison has been dissing me online with lies and rumors. Guys, she's painted me into a monster and made me look like an absolute unreasonable woman. She's been claiming that I'm jealous of her and don't want Derek to marry her because of some stupid reason, claiming that's why they had to postpone the wedding because I manipulated them at the last moment and denied the payment. So they would just have to stop the wedding and Derek would be my little boy forever and ever and ever. And I could not believe the gall of this shameless woman spreading lies and hiding behind them so that she could keep on doing what she does. Well, on a regular day, that would not have caused me any issue as I don't care what people really think about me. A lot of her friends and some of my own relatives have been commenting badly about me online as well, which I have also ignored because these people's opinions about me means nothing to me. However, Ellison's friends have been non-stop calling me and just yelling at me for being a horrible mother-in-law. I could not take this character assassination any longer and called Ellison to stop her from lying. I told her that she knew that she was in the wrong, otherwise she would not have hidden the fact that she reacted badly to my son storming out. She said that her reaction to my son doesn't matter. She called me selfish and jealous, and I could not take it any longer and told her to meet with me. I could hear it in her voice that she was exasperated when she told me to meet her at the church. She reminded me that there's still people who are true to God. Maybe meeting at the church would remind me of God's teachings, and I could not have stopped myself from rolling my eyes at her stupid comment if I even tried. Wow. Now, I'm meeting with her at church in just 5 minutes. It's just a short drive from my house, and we're going to be seeing each other in a week's time. I'm going to force her to take the lies down one way or the other. What I can't understand is where Derek has been. I admit that I've been too proud to call him myself, but he hasn't even reached out to his younger brother, not even to apologize for his fiance's mean comment at dinner. Update number 3. Hey guys, this is Abby on the side again. I want to meet up with the Ellison up at the church today. That snake had something up her sleeve. I should have expected it. Samuel drove me to the church like he always does every Sunday, and I asked him to wait for me, thinking it would not take me longer than 10 minutes inside, but guess what? I was wrong. However, as Ellison had invited her friends and family, I even spotted some townspeople. Ellison got all these people ganged up on me. However, I was not scared or discouraged because these people simply did not scare me. When I reached them, they started yelling at me together, calling me names, and all the while Ellison just stood there smirking at me and I rolled my eyes at her childish behavior. I walked back out, enraging the people even more, and I was only scared that they might get physical with me. But then I would get an opportunity to hit that shameless woman as well. Maybe, just maybe, that's what I was hoping for. Anyways, I opened up the door of the church and Samuel, who was parked just a small distance away, looked up from his phone. I gestured him inside, and when the people in the church saw that I wasn't actually running away, they quieted down a little. Before I walked up to the people again, I asked my son if it was okay if I revealed his sexuality to the people, and he shrugged, saying that he doesn't really care for any of those people because their opinions on his sexuality doesn't matter. I felt so proud of him. I told everyone to calm down. At once, in a very, very stern voice. I'm a teacher, and you know what? It kinda shows in my voice, doesn't it? I told them that my son recently came out as gay to me and my family, and after I so graciously invited Ellison into my house for dinner, she starts going on and on, acting like she does, and, well, I had to ask her to leave the dinner. Then later, she came around and threw slurs at my son for being the way he is. I mean, Now she's lying to them all, and I have proof in the form of my son who agreed to it all. I claimed that I would not pay for someone who was disrespectful to me and my family, and to my son. I even told them that I gave her time to come around and apologize. Only then would I pay for the wedding, but guess what? She refused. Ellison starts screaming that I was lying and I'm a jealous mother-in-law and all sorts of things who would just ruin her life because she was taking away my precious baby boy. Wow. However, everyone only looked at her in complete and utter disbelief. I told them I didn't care what they thought about me, they could believe Ellison for all I cared. But I did tell them to stop dragging me into lies and rumors because it's becoming bothersome to me and my family. I think I got to them because as we walked to our car, I heard one of her aunts yell at Ellison for mistreating my son. I only heard a couple of comments, but I deduced that the aunt's daughter was a lesbian, and she could not believe that she was the aunt of somebody who would act like this. I heard her yell that she can't tolerate it either. Oh, okay. I heard some of her friends also chastising Ellison. Now I'm home, and I think those people believe me as I've stopped being tagged on social media, and people have even stopped the commenting of the bad things about me. Some people have even deleted the comments that they left on Ellison's post. Update number 4. Hello everyone, it's Abby, and I confronted Ellison about 2 weeks ago and turned her friend and relatives against her. I have only seen this on social media, but she has lost a lot of friends. I'm assuming that they're the same people in front of whom I exposed her true colors to, because I backed out on paying for the venue the last minute. The responsibility fell on my son and Ellison, and Derek had paid his half of the payment and just was waiting for Ellison to scrounge up her part of the payment to go ahead with the wedding. However, she has not even come up with a penny. I had not said anything to Derek to be proud of myself and disappointed in my eldest son, who I had thought I had raised better. However, my youngest had given him a call and told him to suck it up. Derek had showed up at my house just a week ago. I'd been too angry with him to let him in and just made him talk on the doorstep. He apologized for taking Ellison's side, and he claimed that he did not really know what else to do in such a complicated situation. He also claimed that he was hoping that Ellison just needed time to accept Samuel. But he was wrong. He said that he wasn't aware of Ellison's lies and rumors or the incident that occurred in the church until Samuel told him. I didn't think he was lying, as Derek is just an older version of Samuel and is a huge introvert as well. I left him in, and he heartily apologized for not standing up for what he thought was right. He revealed that he was done with Ellison's behavior as well, and good on him too, as now I had no intention of paying for the wedding even if Ellison had come and begged me on her knees. Derek revealed that he wished to break the engagement. He just wanted my permission to move into our house so that he would have somewhere to live in the time he found himself a place, away from Ellison. I told him that he could move in. Samuel and Derek had picked up from where they left, so I thought that they had made up before Derek even came over. I'm proud of both of my sons, even Derek. He took some time, but I had raised him right, and I should not have doubted him. I should have kept his non-confrontational personality in mind instead of being disappointed in him. Well, Derek revealed that my words had really shown that people in Ellison's true colors, and most of her friends have stopped talking to her. Ellison has been left all alone, and there's no one else to blame but herself. Yesterday, Derek officially broke it off with the engagement to Ellison, and I'm glad that they had to postpone their wedding so that Derek got to see Ellison's true colors and break up with her instead of getting stuck in a marriage to a woman like that. Update number 5. Hello everyone, it's Abby again, and I think it's time to tell you about the aftermath of what happened. It's been 4 months, and I don't expect anything else huge to happen after this. Derek and Ellison are officially broken up. Fortunately, Ellison did show up a few days after their breakup to beg Derek to come back. She even promised to ask me and Samuel for forgiveness if it meant that Derek would take her back. I told her that I would never forgive her, not after she tried to humiliate me in front of everybody she knew, and Derek wasn't happy either. He finally stood up for what he believed in, and he told her that he didn't want her to apologize because she was too desperate. He would have preferred if she had actually changed, which he knew she didn't. He made it very clear to her that Samuel meant the world to him. He was his little brother, and he would do anything for him. Ever since that day, we haven't really seen Derek's ex-fiancée, but we have seen a lot of Samuel's new boyfriend. Apparently, they've been dating for a year and just hid it from everyone. I could not believe I haven't picked up on it sooner, as he often brought the boy home and played video games with him. Either way, I like his boyfriend, and I'm glad that he felt comfortable enough to introduce, his friends as his boyfriend to us. Derek, on the other hand, hasn't really dated. I went to see him and set him up with this cute teacher at my school who has just started working there. I think they're going to be great together. However, Derek is still kind of hung up on Ellison. They'd spent a lot of years together after all, so I gave him space. Also, he did find an apartment of his own a month ago and has been living there ever since. And you know what? That's it for the update. Thank you for reading about this unnecessary drama in my life. I hope Ellison never returns to our lives in any shape or form.
Story 6th.
My wife and I had recently had to let go of our son David after he's been forcefully taken away from us by cancer. I'm doing my best to try to adjust to it, but my wife is not doing well at all. It's been 2 months and it's still hard on her. I've caught her crying in her sleep twice since David's death. One time she called out his name and gotten silent when she remembered what our new reality was. If you've ever had a relative with cancer, or have one right now, then you know how difficult it is to adjust to. And you're not even the patient, so your feelings are nothing compared to theirs. The constant medication therapy and watching life slowly leave the body of a loved one is a nightmare. A relative had told us that it had all happened for the best as David was finally at peace. I don't know about that, but I do know that I wish my son was here. I do. Whenever I try to stay strong for my wife and push aside or hide my pain, I just want to break something or yell at the heavens for taking David immediately after. I'll always remember the little stages of David's life. I never did forget them, but when he was healthy, I did not acknowledge them either. He was the brilliant type, probably inherited from, his mom. I used to be so proud of the excellent grades and awards that he brought from home. He wasn't really sporty, and I remember being disappointed about that in the beginning. I tried to get him to like soccer or any sport, but he turned out to be bad. He was fair at tennis, I'd say, and developed the skills. I wish that I was happier when I discovered this. Instead, I just tried so much, until Edna told me to leave him as he was. At that time, I just really wanted to boast that my son was both academically gifted and sport gifted. I wish I had not made him do that. He had sensed my slight disappointment and had switched to enjoying sports on the TV, and had grown to like it. I felt better after it, but now that I think about it, David wasn't so enthusiastic about it right from the very beginning. He did it because of me. I should stop talking about this now. It's really hard for me. High school was another trying time for me, or is it for David, since I put pressure on him. He wasn't a fan of parties, and he only ever had one girlfriend till he graduated. I thought he was bullied at school at some point due to his reluctance to do what his schoolmates usually do. It turned out that David really liked his solitude. Compared to loud activities and constant mingling, he had good friends and his girlfriend was a wonderful girl. They broke up when she went to study in another country. David was also really respected at school because of his brain and easygoing nature. Edna had told me to be happy that things were that way for him, instead of being upset that he wasn't your regular teenager. She always was closer to David, and I'll always be grateful for her being around just to take care of our son with me. David grew up to be a fine man, because of Edna mainly. Well, that dreaded moment when David was diagnosed. Leukemia. It was a few months after he had gotten married to Janet. We were all shocked by the news, and I watched as my once happy son slowly became depressed. To make matters worse, Janet had left him, saying that she could not be with someone who was going to drop dead any time. I gave her the benefit of the doubt by assuming that she was only talking out of pain, but that was not the case. You see, my horrid daughter-in-law abandoned David, straight up. At the moment he needed her the most. It's something I'll never forgive her for. Edna took David under her wing and took care of him. and I did my best to help my family. Medical bills, quality family time, and father-son discussions. David was slowly getting better as he continued to receive treatment, but he was never the same post-diagnosis, and now he's really gone. Edna and I deluded ourselves into thinking that he would be back to normal if we just ensured David took his treatment seriously. Despite what the doctors had clearly told us, it's painful when all your hope just gets deflated in the blink of an eye. The call from the hospital was nothing compared to seeing David in the state that he was in. Edna had cried rivers, and I'd cried later in the bathroom. We held the funeral just 3 weeks ago, and I really hope that my son, wherever he is, finds the happiness that he truly deserves. I'm telling you all this so you judge with full knowing of the story. Edna and I received shock 2 days ago. My wife is passive about it and can't care less, but I personally think that she should not ignore it as much as she is. You see, Janet called me 2 days ago and asked for money to take care of her son, Stephen. At first I thought she was insane, but when she told me the child was David's, I had to pay more attention to her. It turns out that Janet said, she hadn't known she was pregnant at the time she left my son. She'd also been keeping tabs on David and knew when the funeral rites were done and over with, and I told her I'd get back to her and discuss the issue with Edna later that night. She had told me to ignore Janet, who was trying to get the money out of us. I don't know if that really is the case. Yes, the girl messed up a lot. Yes, she left David. Yes, kept his child from him and did not even have the decency to pay David some respects when she was well aware of his passing. But what she could do was call and ask for money. Believe me, if she wasn't taking care of David's alleged child, I would have ignored her without thinking twice. But I could not let my grandson suffer like that. It was unfair to the boy. He had done nothing wrong. Edna does not want to budge, though, and her decision really matters to me. Do I just ignore Janet? I'll definitely call to get proof, but if she really is telling the truth, then I don't know what I'll do next, honestly. Update number 1. Guys, Janet was not lying. In a way, I knew this already. Edna and I have seen Stephen and have confirmed that he really is our grandbaby. And yes, we do send Janet money. Mainly because of Stephen. The things I noticed when I visited, I have a few theories, and Edna agrees with me. Then there's the fact that Janet's being highly unreasonable. She never really seemed like the sensible type to me, but her actions lately are just annoying. I'll start from the very beginning when Janet contacted me after David's passing. I contacted her again, asking her to send me a picture of her child. It wasn't a sure way of knowing if she was telling the truth, but I wanted to see her son, and when I did, I was convinced. Stephen was a spitting replica of David. His face and eyes, and I showed Edna the picture, and I was sent, and after a while she agreed to send money to Janet, but we had to visit the child first. It took a while for Janet to agree to let us see our grandson. At first she was upset about us not wanting to help out till we saw Stephen for ourselves, but at some point she caved. My best guess is that she understood that she would not be getting anything if she did not do what we asked. We still had to be sure that she wasn't trying to extort us. At that time, Edna had told me that while Stephen did share a few features with David, she would never trust someone like Janet. After reminding me of the things Janet had done to, our dying son, I understood where she was coming from. In fact, I agreed with her completely. The visit was not a long one, and I should have mentioned the fact that Edna and Janet cannot stand each other, though it should be obvious. Even before Janet vanished, Edna had always thought Janet was wrong for David. She turned out to be right, but the deed had been done. I tried to keep both women's tongues in checks because of Stephen. He was quiet all throughout and reminded me of David when he was younger. I know Edna said that she wanted 100% certainty, but I could tell. I'm sure she could too, but just wanted tangible proof. After overlooking how much Stephen reminded me of David, I noticed the other details. He was too pale, like he spent all his time indoors. He also was quite slim, and other than being quiet, was shy. It took a while for him to talk to Edna, and she was great with children. I don't want to jump to conclusions by saying Janet wasn't doing a good job as a mom. Steven's room wasn't anything to write home about, though. The toys that were in the room were either defective or clearly overused. He had a few clothes and shoes, and there were books in the room. I thought Janet had bought them for him, but he got them from either school or his classmates. A bookworm like David. I promised Steven that I'd get him more books when next time I visited, and he lit up like a Christmas tree. It was both a sad and joyful thing to witness. Edna was quite upset with Janet, and as soon as she noticed that I'd returned to the living room alone, asked Janet what she did for a living. She doesn't have a job, so I asked why she didn't reach out earlier if she knew she didn't have the means to take care of little Steven, and even herself. She made up some excuse about her not wanting to add to our troubles with David at the time. Was she kidding me? I think it was at the time I realized fully well that David had died without knowing that Steven even existed. Edna had said that, well, to me before we visited, but it hit sometime during the visit. I got mad at Janet, but unlike Edna, I'm quiet when I'm upset. I just watched the exchange between Janet and my wife. I'll keep this short. Edna did not find Janet's current condition satisfactory and had wired her some money to take care of Steven. She also asked Janet to send her resume so she could help her search for a job, since she could not find one herself. Edna had even wanted to cook before we left, but surprise, there was little to nothing in the fridge. We left disappointed but hopeful. Edna and I talked about everything after visiting Steven and Janet. She told me that she felt she was making a mistake sending someone like Janet money, but I wasn't sure. Janet was still a mother, and it wasn't like she was glowing while Steven looked unhealthy. I told her that we would check up on Steven after a few weeks, and we did. I gave the little guy some more books I thought he would like. He was happy, so happy I almost cried because his joy was so contagious. This was about a month ago. Along with what I'll term Janet's monthly stipend, we've sent her rent for the next 6 months and some money for an online degree Janet was interested in getting. Honestly, at some point, her demands were starting to irritate me, but whenever I remembered Steven, I reminded myself that it was all for him. Edna was unable to get Janet a good job with her experience, and after giving Janet some advice, she was able to convince her to get an online degree and work remotely. Well, the latter was temporary enough, though, and I'm not entirely surprised. Edna had asked to see Steven again. She was planning a trip for when he was on holidays, and then there was the fact that she adores Steven. To our surprise, Janet refused. She told us that she did not want us to see Steven anymore. I'd personally called, and she didn't even give a reasonable excuse, reminding me that she had the right to let whoever she wanted see her child. She mentioned that Edna was not a good influence on Steven, which was quite laughable. When I pointed out that she did not like Edna because she never held herself back when it came to berating and criticizing her actions, Janet agreed. But she called it emotional blackmail and mental harassment. She also said that we were trying to turn her son against her, as Steven anticipated our visit and asked when the next time we would see my wife and me. There are times when you really can't say anything to a person for your own sanity. This was one of those trying times. I had to end the call because Janet was making no sense, and I did not think that I would make her understand without losing my own damn sanity. I was annoyed at myself afterward, but felt that I needed to sit back and think everything through. So I told Edna not to call Janet again, despite her wanting to. Most likely she would get upset and worsen the situation, though I really don't know why Janet made this decision all of a sudden. Also, I've made plans to go see Steven, whether or not Janet wants us to. What exactly does she think she's going to keep us away from our grandbaby after everything that we've done for her? Update number 2. Edna went on a trip with Janet. This might seem surprising given how things ended last time, but there's a plan in motion, and I'm here to stay with Steven while Edna executes her plan. Honestly, I really don't know what it is and why she had to travel out with Janet, But if it will help that woman see reason, then guys, I'm completely fine with it. The most annoying thing happened when we went over to visit Stephen and Janet. They weren't home. I thought that simply somehow Janet had found out that we were coming, though it must have been highly unlikely. Edna had reasoned that we were just there at the wrong time, but why on earth did it have to be when we visit that they were just miraculously absent? Edna and I planned to wait till late at night until a neighbor informed us that Janet had moved out. Yeah, that's quite shocking, isn't it? When she had left. And where was she living now, I wondered. Nobody in the building even knew, though. A lot of tenants really disliked Janet, while others didn't even know who she was. That drive home was disappointing, and before I could stop her, Edna had called and demanded that Janet tell her where she was. We didn't learn much after that call, and Janet really had moved, but she refused to tell us where. When I asked if she wanted us to do something first before she revealed her location, she told me that she was interested in having a house of her own. I wondered if that woman even knew how much it cost to, get a house built. I hung up on her, sure that she had lost her mind finally. Edna was having none of it and had informed me that she was finally going to give Janet the punishment she deserved. She was very upset, and she said and ranted and raved about how selfish and insensitive Janet was. The first thing she did was to record another conversation between herself and Janet. That was the first time I'd hear her speak to Janet without insulting her in any way. When I asked why she recorded the conversation, she said she needed the proof. From the little I managed to overhear, Edna had talked about providing everything for Janet and Stephen. Despite not being Stephen's legal parents, she also brought up Janet's keeping of Stephen away from the entire family and went over the state of Janet's former apartment. I'm not sure, but I think Edna was trying to get proof that Janet was an unsuitable guardian for Stephen. Anyone who heard the little I did would immediately think of taking Stephen away from her. It was smart on Edna's part, I'll admit, and I wondered how dense Janet could really be. Oh, right. Before that particular conversation, Edna had promised to consider Janet's request. That was probably why Janet had let the conversation go on for that long. I had to ask Edna if she was serious, and she laughed and called me silly. The day after the phone call, Edna had asked me if I would be able to take care of Stephen. I said I would be able to, and had to ask why. She told me that she would be traveling out with Janet soon on a mini vacation. She refused to tell me anything until she had gotten justice for David and Stephen. Her words. With the way that she spoke, the last thing on her mind was a relaxing mini vacation. So what exactly did she aim to achieve by traveling out with our daughter-in-law? Edna stayed up for some nights, thinking. She mentioned something about the law not catching up to her because of her plans, but I didn't understand. She said it while thinking out loud. Well, she's a retired lawyer. I didn't ask, though. Edna was capable and a smart woman. She knew what she was doing and why she was doing it. Yes, I was beyond curious, but I trusted her more than anything. If she said she was going to get justice, she was. It would be nice if I knew what she was up to, though. Update number 3. It's been a while, and in that span of time, quite a number of things have happened. Stephen now lives with Edna and I. Janet's out of our lives for Lord knows how long, but she isn't going to be back anytime soon. I'll tell you the best I can, because even I don't know everything. Edna refuses to tell me for a reason, and I don't know what that reason is. Janet did tell me a few things, and while I do pity her, she deserves it. Edna and Janet left the country 3 weeks ago. Edna booked a flight straight to Barbados. We had a small house there, so I assumed she would just take Janet to the house. And then Janet arrived with Stephen when the preparations were made. We had all agreed that I'd stay with Stephen. He was still young, so I had to make sure that he was going to school and eating right. I'm not so good in the kitchen, but Edna had left enough food in the fridge and asked a neighbor for a favor. Stephen was just as bad the first time I saw him, if he wasn't worse. I asked Janet what she had been doing with the money we gave her, and she ignored me. Edna was silent as she looked between Stephen and Janet, and I had a feeling that if murder wasn't a crime, Janet would never have escaped the death of that moment. I still get upset and mad whenever I think about it. Janet herself was wearing what I'm sure was brand new clothing, yet Stephen looked like he only ate a meal all day. I would have slapped her if Stephen wasn't around, whether it was the right thing to do or not. Stephen is an amazing kid. I was quite surprised to learn that he hasn't shied at all. It was more of awareness and fear of what Janet would do to him when he was alone with her. He was smart, as I expected, and while he did not understand the games, he was always asking questions about them. As weird and cheesy as this may sound, I sometimes think I'm reliving my moments with David. I wasn't going to make the same mistakes I did, though, and I encouraged Stephen's reading habits, buying him more books and reading them with him. Reading's a nice pastime for me now, and Stephen wrote a poem for me about me and Edna. It wasn't long, but it brought a big smile to my face. The piece of paper with the poem in it is now in my wallet, and I've read it to myself sometimes. Edna returned a week ago, and she was smiling from ear to ear, and I knew her plan was a success. I asked about Janet's whereabouts to know when to get Stephen ready to leave, and Edna had told me that Janet was staying in Barbados for a while, and that we were responsible for Stephen for the time being. Well, I didn't mind. In fact, I was happy with the news. I had more time with my grandson, and Janet was nowhere to be found. That was, until she called me 4 days ago with a foreign number, and that was how I learned what Edna had done to Janet. Ugh, Janet had told me that Edna had abandoned her in the house. She then told me some jerks had her bound and tortured for days. I could only make noises as I listened, hoping it was nothing more than a dirty lie. Janet was sure that Edna was behind everything and had promised to make her pay. I confronted Edna, obviously. She told me that the police weren't going to do anything about it and that she was only doing what she meant to be done. Edna was behind the jerks attacking Janet, and she had given them instructions and even paid them to make sure Janet learned her lesson. Well, in the beginning, the very beginning, I thought she made a mistake. Janet wasn't a good person, but she was still Stephen's mother. Edna then reminded me of the recording she had, along with more proof of Janet's ineptitude. Well, Janet had said quite a number of things to Edna without thinking. When I told her that Janet had plans to make her pay for messing with her, Edna promised that nothing of the sort was going to happen. Janet called again yesterday, and she asked for money to leave Barbados, so I gave the phone to Edna. I literally had nothing to say to her. After Edna was done talking to Janet, she told me that Janet was going to lay low for the time being. The recordings were one thing that she could use against her in court in the case of a child neglect. Edna promised to put Janet in prison if she even attempted to mention her assault in Barbados to anyone. She also told me that she was going to make sure Janet paid all the money that we had given her, since she did not use it to do what it was meant for. I'm not a lawyer, but I can tell Janet is in a tight spot as it is. She has multiple pieces of proof of evidence against her. No evidence that Edna was behind her assault and was going to pay back a large amount of money when she was literally jobless. This is why I said I pitied her earlier on. At the same time, she deserves it for what she put my entire family through. I talked to Stephen about his mother before he went to sleep yesterday. He mentioned something about missing her, but wishing she was nice. My heart broke for the kid. I don't know how long it'll take all 3 of us to adjust, but hey, I'll do my very best to ensure that little Stephen lacks absolutely nothing.
Story 7th.
My husband and I have been together for 5 years, and his sister has been with her fiancé for about 1.5. She is my husband's only sibling and is a few years older. We're all in our 20s. Sister-in-law and I are a lot alike. We even have the exact same occupation at different places. My mother and I used to be very good friends. Well, I don't have any family to speak of, so she took on the mothering role for me. We would hang out all the time, go shopping, go to the salon, and my husband is very close with her too. So, we hung out at their house all the time, and father-in-law and I are becoming pretty good friends at this point, and I thought mother-in-law and I were doing okay. However, our close relationship changed after sister-in-law moved into my in-laws' house for whatever reason, my mother-in-law has taken it upon herself to always point out how much better my sister-in-law is at everything. For example, I called my mother-in-law a little while ago because my dog was having some behavioral issues, and I just wanted some advice, and she said, "Well, you know, sister-in-law has 2 dogs, and she takes them regularly to a trainer and for 3-mile runs every day, even though she works way harder and more than you do. I've also struggled with an eating disorder since I was a child, and now, whenever I mention anything about my eating habits or anything remotely related, my sister-in-law and mother-in-law says something like, 'Well, sister-in-law doesn't worry about her weight. She isn't shallow like that. She eats whatever she pleases and is fine.' Before my sister-in-law moved in, I once accompanied my sister-in-law and mother-in-law to the dentist, where my mother-in-law would not stop talking about how great my sister-in-law was while making fun of me. My sister would try and shush her because, well, she was the only person speaking in the family doctor. And everyone could hear her, and it was private, personal details that did not need to be shared. As we were leaving, my mother-in-law was almost in tears, hugging her like she'd never seen her again and making her promise to come back in a few weeks. What? I felt completely bamboozled. I think I needed that visit with her to realize I'd never do it again. I don't believe anything's wrong with her. I think she is nuts. A few days after that, I went on a hike with my husband and in-laws, which is a family activity that we usually enjoy. I slept in, and no one wanted to bother me, so they went without me. I figured that everyone had gone, but when I was eating my cereal, my mother-in-law came out of the kitchen and sat next to me. I just figured that she would have gone on the hike, but I guess not. She starts apologizing for making fun of me and then said that it was just a nervous tic, and when she didn't want to talk about something serious. We then had a big family event coming up over a multi-day span. It began on a day when both sister-in-law and I had to work. She managed to get the whole day off, but I did not, and I still have to work half days, which would make my significant other and I somewhat late for the event. But again, it's a multi-day affair, so I didn't think it would make much of a difference. Well, we called mother-in-law the other day to let her know what time that we would be there, and she became enraged and said, "What the hell? Sister-in-law got the whole day off and she does the exact same job. Can't I try harder? She doesn't even care. At least sister-in-law cares." Keep in mind that I knew this would happen, so I had arranged a bit of work, and I went extremely early so we can make the event as early as possible. I mean, I'm going to work that day at 4:30 a.m. Well, anyways, this caused a huge fight, and after which mother-in-law declared that she does not want me to go at all now, and that she wants my significant other to go with her and leave me home because, well, clearly she cares more about work than family. I just don't understand what I've done wrong. My mother-in-law does not have any animosity towards me in other situations and generally acts completely normal and friendly. Other than the comparisons, I do my best to be the best wife possible, good, kind person, and a hard-working woman. I've tried to confront her over this once, but she just laughed it off and told me to stop being so jealous of sister-in-law, who is a very sweet and humble person, and that it was sad how much I resented them. I don't feel any jealousy at all. I just wanted us to be a happy family. I like sister-in-law a lot and really want her to be my real sister in the future, but I don't know how much more of my self-esteem can take. I would never ask my significant other to choose between me and his mother, but I could not stay in this situation regardless. Once she told me she needed to drop by for a few moments, so I said okay and let her in. She then mentions how much cleaner her sister keeps their part of the house, and I was not expecting that she would come to complain. I honestly thought she just wanted to see me or something. It doesn't matter what it is I'm talking about. Mother-in-law always makes it a point to remark on how much better sister-in-law is at this thing. How sister-in-law's opinions on the matter are so much more understandable, or how much better of a person she is. Anyway, I talked to my sister-in-law, who, by the way, I absolutely adore and have a fantastic relationship with. She'll interject herself and proceed to tell me all the things my sister-in-law has done, and how well she's done them. Anything I cook that my father-in-law enjoys, she acts irritated and talks about how sister-in-law could cook better if she felt like putting more effort in. Yet, she ignores me and does not respond to my friendly emails asking her for recipes, etc. And it goes on and on and on like that. I mean, oh man, she honestly has this knack for comparing everything in her comparisons. She has never once said anything positive or in favor of me, and it's gotten to the point where I no longer want to visit with them at all because I just leave feeling hurt and angry. It all came to a head for me recently when she stayed over at our house for the holidays. She snapped at me after making a few observations regarding the kind of relationship that I have with my husband. My husband and I share all responsibilities equal. She feels that her baby, this is the exact term she used while yelling at me, is being burdened with cooking food and chores around the house, and she also feels that his having to serve food and drinks to himself is my failure to be a good wife. He told her to mind her own business and stay out of our affairs. On the day my in-laws arrived, we were going on with our usual fun banter and roast moments when she stepped in and started defending him, accusing me of insulting him. My husband told her to cut it out since we were having fun. Yesterday, he and I had a disagreement over a topic and had an argument that was not loud. She stepped in to save her son, who was allegedly getting assaulted. This time, he flipped his lid and snapped at her badly for not minding her own business. Well, she got revenge on me by calling me a disgrace to the family. According to her, I'm the worst daughter-in-law ever, and that her daughter is way better wife than me. She said all these things when my husband wasn't around, though, and I did not see this coming. I was in tears. I locked myself in my room and waited for my husband since he was supposed to reach home in less than 30 minutes. I also sent him a message, telling him to come to our room as soon as he gets home. After we talked about it, he told me in private to not hesitate to call him anymore, or my father-in-law, if she went out of line again. He openly told his mom to watch her mouth, and to behave civilly as long as she was here, or she could leave if they intended to abuse me. She cried for an hour or two while blaming me for separating her from her son and turning him against her. I'm being blamed for having a normal life with my man, and somehow I ruined her and her son's life by poisoning the mother-baby bond. 2 days later, I receive an apology card and a huge bunch of flowers from my mother in the mail. 2 weeks later, I found out that we were having a baby. I'm okay with any comparison about me, I just don't want the same thing to happen when my baby's born, when she says her baby looks better or something. Ugh. Mother-in-law invited us for dinner and said that she had an important request to make. She brought her request up to the dinner table and blatantly said that she wanted to be in the delivery room with me when I gave birth. I was taken back by her request. I really thought it had something to do with the nursery or diaper brand. I said I was sorry, but only my husband would be there. She made a face, got quiet for a while, and then brought it up again. She just kept pushing, saying she is as much of a grandmother as my mom, and that she just wanted to be there for support and get the opportunity to see her grandbaby's first moments. My husband actually sided with her. I just started staring at her and said, it's all right. You can have the opportunity to be in the delivery room when it's your son who's giving birth. Everyone stopped eating and my mother-in-law left the table in an instant. My husband had me get up, although I had not finished dinner, but he said we should leave. In the car, he lost it on me, asking what brain cells, which made me think it was a good idea to tell his mom that. I told him his mom kept pushing after I'd already given her a strict answer. Still, he said this was the most messed up crap that he's ever heard me say, and I replied that I was just frustrated and did not mean to hurt her feelings or cause issues. He argued that if I did not want issues, then I should stop making crap difficult and just say yes to his mother's requestings. Wow. He then ranted about how it's childish too, and then said if his mom isn't allowed in there, then he won't be there either. Now, I don't know if he really meant this or just said it in the heat of the moment type thing, but it had me fuming. He's been ignoring me when I try to talk to him and acting like I'm not in the room. I think I might have gone a bit too far and created tension by responding inappropriately. There has been some tension between me and my husband and his family lately, which probably blew up because of, well, built-up resentment. I don't want to tell my husband that I don't want his mother to be around our kid, but I do know for an absolute fact that I do not want to have to interact with her while I'm pregnant. This means getting through Thanksgiving and Christmas, not to mention the baby shower. Now, the main problem is that my mother got a new companion, and I know that I'm the scapegoat by default. She has spent the last few months thinking about my failures as a wife, and there was little while when I went to a serious dark place and just questioned whether she was right, whether I should not have become a wife. And if my husband would be better off without me, because, well, that's how I felt, but I am feeling better now. It was starting to take a toll on my mental health, and it was inadvertently making me resent the girl. This is not fair because sister-in-law is a perfectly lovely person who was very nice to me. So, when I found out that she was cheating on her fiancé, I did not want to use it against my mother-in-law. She would anyways just think I was making stuff up out of jealousy. I came to know about the cheating when we were running low on certain sauces, so I decided to head to my favorite grocery store located in a different part of town to stock up. Well, on my way, I passed a cafe, and these restaurants aren't as busy as they used to be, so it's easy to notice who's sitting inside. To my surprise, I found my fiancé's sister, canoodling with some guy. This was shocking to me because as far as I knew, my sister was in a serious relationship with her fiancé. My husband would have definitely told me if they broke up because him and his sister are close. I mean, they tell each other everything. I probably stood there staring for about 2 whole minutes in shock. She was basically sitting in his lap and she kept stroking his cheek. Luckily, I had my mask and they were honestly too focused on each other to really notice. When I tried to get a closer look at the guy, I maybe was just wondering if it could possibly be her boyfriend somehow. I realized that I recognized him. He was one of my in-laws' close friends. He's probably in his early to mid-40s, and I've met him a few times whenever my husband's family hosted events at special dinners. The other day, I went over to my in-laws' house for a dinner event with a few extended family members and close friends. While my husband was out with friends, father-in-law is very sweet, and after dinner, he went to his office to work, and as soon as he left, mother-in-law started to say to me that she was so sorry for just being off with me, but she had been doing it unintentionally, and she was just finding it all very difficult. Cue an emotional rant about how my sister is perfect, my soulmate, and everything you could ever wish for in a woman for your son to marry. She was, quote, their whole world. She was telling me about the holidays she and her boyfriend went on together, and how wonderful she was. Mother-in-law even said that she missed her so much that it felt like she had lost her best friend. At this point, she started to cry. After about 20 minutes of listening to how my sister-in-law was oh so perfect and wonderful and everything a woman should be, my father-in-law came back into the room. They were talking gossip, as old men and grandparents do, and mother-in-law just stopped talking. I texted my husband. He was absolutely furious and set off from where he was straight away, and went to bed as we were staying at their house for the night. Mother-in-law followed me to the room and gave me a hug, saying, "I hope you're okay with everything I've told you tonight." I started laughing and just told her, your perfect daughter is not as perfect as you think, and told her that she'd have a lot to learn about her daughter from Fred, the in-law's friend with whom sister-in-law's cheating. And when she ran downstairs hurriedly and mentioned my sister's name to Fred, he started to apologize, and everything was eventually revealed. My sister-in-law called me after, and she had been told what happened and spent an hour on the phone telling me that I'm an a-hole for bringing her into this mess. My husband came back shortly afterward, and we went to sleep. In the morning, mother-in-law was sober and acting like nothing happened, and my husband took me to the car without saying a word, and she came out asking what was wrong. My husband hit the roof and told her exactly what was wrong, and we drove away. Now, because of my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law is angry with me. I regret what I said in the heat of the moment, but at the risk of sounding callous, my mother-in-law needed to be put in check before this continued to get out of hand. Ever since I revealed about my sister-in-law, my mother-in-law has stopped the stupid comparisons. However, my relationship with my sister is absolutely destroyed. She's been quite nasty to me, and no matter how many times I tried to fix the relationship, she'd find something to pick at. So at this point, I basically just avoid contact with her. My husband says he's not mad at me for anything. But guys, I'm mad at myself. Still, why is my sister mad at me when all I did was reveal the truth? I mean, she's the one who had an affair with a 40-year-old who's also happened to be her parents' friend. She lied to her family every single day and cheated on her fiancé every day. But she's mad at me. Also, she's never even came to me woman to woman to discuss the affair if she needed help or advice from a close friend. The only conversation we've even had about it is when she called me to tell me I was an a-hole. I'm so angry that my mother-in-law would really attempt to make drama between me and my sister-in-law when we were finally getting along. Update number 1. Good morning. I woke up and this got more attention than I imagined. I've read and appreciate all your comments, but I unfortunately don't have the time to respond to them all. So I just want to take a couple of things I've seen a few times. To the person saying inbred hillbillies would be better than my husband and his family by now, my husband has stood up by me through all this. He was fully prepared to go completely no contact, but as someone who doesn't have either parent in my life, I did not want him to completely lose his mother. So, we agreed on very small amounts of contact. My husband and I are expecting a baby boy. We're barely catching up with preparation and getting everything ready. As with my sister, she's no longer engaged to her fiancé. They broke up the night of the dinner when her cheating was exposed. It looks like my mother-in-law has a tendency to make excuses for her, even when presented with glaring evidence. She shamelessly continues praising my sister while putting me down. Despite knowing about the cheating, every now and then, mother-in-law keeps bringing her up and saying how she is so successful and all this crap. If I mention my studies at a family get-together, she starts talking about her daughter's experiences. How her guides praised her, and that she was such a bright student, all that crap. She completely destroys what I said when it just starts rambling about her daughter. I was then talking about how one of my cousins is moving to Canada, and mother-in-law says, "Yeah, these days kids don't even study well and just want to move to Canada." I said, he's a commerce graduate? She said, yeah, but there's no value in this degree. Either way, it should be like sister-in-law. Look, she has such a good degree and a great job. Only thing is worth migrating to these countries. And I was just quiet. I felt so angry because she just wanted an excuse to put her daughter in every conversation. Honestly, it sounds very tone-deaf, and I'm sure she's like this with other people too. I understand that she's proud of her daughter's achievements. I get it. But being proud is one thing and putting somebody down is another. Sometimes I feel like I'm being insecure. But she just does not stop and I really get negatively affected. Sister-in-law's not rubbing anything in my face, however. I'm getting jealous of her. All because of that snake mother-in-law. What's the bet that mother-in-law is doing the same to her so that we can never be friends? She's just triangulating us both and trying to make us hate each other so she can stay in control as the top woman in the house. It's very likely she's just doing this to make me scramble for her approval and be a slave to her every whim, to make her like me again. Sorry, I'm rambling, guys. It's 1:30 in the morning, and I'm tired, a bit out of it, and a bit lonely, so it's making me just ramble. I'm going to bed. Thank you for your words and encouragement. It's nice to hear it sometimes. Update number 2. So, we had a woman's party at my in-laws' house a couple days ago, and when my mother-in-law's friends asked about her daughter-in-law, aka me, she said how I'm a terrible cook, which is also true, but I just used some self-humility jokes here and there, and it didn't bother me too much. However, later, the topic changed to household chores and house duties. After the other women shared about their daughter-in-law, their sons, son-in-laws, etc., my mother-in-law starts to rant about me. She said, unlike her daughter, my home is always a mess. I make my husband get up with me every morning, I'm lazy at home, I sleep all day long, and I don't wash my husband's laundry. It basically implied that my husband was the breadwinner while I was a leech. Here is the ridiculous part, are you ready? I'm a medical resident. I make 3 times my husband's salary, and I work just as much as him, up to 38.5 weeks induced at 39. I'm not belittling women who are stay-at-home mothers or anything like that who want to make the house a home, but I made it clear to both my husband and his family that I was a career woman, not somebody who wants to enjoy keeping up with house chores, beyond what's expected of a basic adult, obviously. I have great respect for women who are stay-at-home moms, though, don't get it twisted. So I made it known to the group. The women all start to say, oh, of course, your daughter-in-law would not be like you. She's not a stay-at-home mother. My mother-in-law has no education and has spent her life caring for her son and keeping up with the home, which again is fine, but don't expect me to do it. My mother's face turned red from anger and embarrassment, and she insisted we leave the party and yelled at me for embarrassing her in front of her friends. My husband does not agree with what she said at the gathering, but he did say I should have just saved her face in public and talked about it at home. He did tell his mother, though, her actions were wrong, and she should not have painted his wife in such a poor, inaccurate picture in public. So, I told him to understand that her saving face is not just more important than mine saving face. He believes it's because it's among her friends and not among mine, and I won't have to see them ever again, so I don't have to keep being reminded how I was humiliated. But I don't want a reputation for being lazy or incompetent because I will lose patience or something. Not to mention that I never put my mother-in-law down. I just corrected the false narrative my mother-in-law was spewing out of her filthy mouth. She was not nearly as gracious while verbally trashing me, and I firmly believe I have permission to call someone out in the same environment and medium with the same audience that they chose to start the conversation with. They consider it an appropriate topic for that setting, so they have no ground to object when I just respond on the same topic that they're talking about. If she does not want to be humiliated, she should have kept my name out of her mouth. Mother-in-law should try to save face by showing how good of a marriage their son has. Should not she be praising me for being a doctor and a good mom? Like, that's something that they'll gain her status from friends with? Well, here's my hypothesis. It's my mother-in-law probably has feelings about the fact that her son's not the primary breadwinner. By playing up to his contributions, she probably had to diminish mine. I presume she initially left out the fact that I'm a doctor so her friends would not figure it out. I really should not have to lie to appease her or minimize myself to make her feel better about her daughter. I'm starting to think that she already knew about the affair even before it's exposed. Hence, she pits half the family against me to create enough drama to drown out the affair. Whew! What do I do here? How do I handle my mother-in-law? Because it seems she's the entire problem between me and my husband's family. Update number 3. Hey guys, so, you ready for this one? My mother-in-law came to our house a few days ago with my father-in-law and sister-in-law. She had a huge grin on her face as I walked towards her with my husband beside me. They were all happily spending their time together while I felt ignored. There needs to be a bad guy in the Carp-Man drama triangle, right? And since I'm not a blood family, it's likely to be me. She's creating a wedge between me and my husband and my sister, and this way she can play her games between us. And because she'll have built up such resentment between us, no one will be the wiser. So I flipped the script. I took a step back. I took a deep yoga breath. Then the next day, secretly took sister-in-law out to lunch and laid it all out on the line. She struggles with codependency when it comes to her mom, and to be fair, she has been conditioned to be that way. However, she seems to be someone who actively works on herself and is super kind and empathetic. I spoke with her to say that I think she's great, and this is not about her at all. I told her it was not my intention to expose her affair and that I was truly sorry that it happened. I then explained to her that she had been doing to me ever since my sister moved in to bring the, pattern to her attention. I let her know how obsessed my mother-in-law is with her and how she's always talking about her, and it's weird. It's very messed up, but I'm thinking you might be able to help there. I didn't want her to feel like we were crapping on her mom. She understands that her mom can be too much, but I do think she is codependent, and I was also waffling on whether to tell her some of the specific incidents that happened. There's about a snowball's chance that mother-in-law has been honest about what happened anyways. Anything I said was likely to get back to mother-in-law, which I didn't really care about since I was being truthful. I hesitated to vent about my in-laws to the other in-laws. At the end of the day, they're family and I'm not. Thankfully, my sister understands this woman's cunningness, and she shared all her issues with me regarding her own mother. We're planning to have a small meet-up with my husband tomorrow, and my sister and my husband want us to all sit down and chit-chat. We need to stop this woman's games. Update number 4. We had the meeting, guys. This is my final updates. I have proof. As I was complicit in my mother-in-law's triangulation tactics when she constantly gossiped about me to my husband and sister-in-law, most of the time my sister would just uncomfortably listen, but on a few occasions she partook. I don't even want to think about all the horrible things she said about me. Side story. I know a few comments mother-in-law made because sister-in-law decided I needed to know and repeatedly blew through my boundaries. Please don't tell me the nasty things mother-in-law says about me to tell me. They were mostly comments about my work and my inability to be a good mom. With my sister-in-law's ideas, I started asking, what does your sister-in-law do in circumstances that you're having trouble with? I got spaghetti sauce on my shorts, and do you know how sister-in-law gets stains out? Bonus, when I asked her what sister-in-law does in areas my mother-in-law considers hers, car shopping, cleaning, international negotiations, you name it. When she starts to tell me what she'd do, I'd politely respond, but sister-in-law's so much better at that, don't you think? I just need to troll her, mess with her. I make it a drinking game. Everything gets bounced over to my sister-in-law, and I let her know what's happening and see if she can do the same. I also became my sister's #1 cheerleader. I go way over the top with it. I mean way over. I make it so that my mother-in-law even thinks of breathing a word about jealousy. She looks completely delusional. Now that I've developed a relationship with sister-in-law, that does not include mother-in-law. For example, me and my husband invite brother-in-law and sister-in-law over for dinner, right? Game night, going to local events, etc. When we're together, nobody mentions that lying, spineless, sad sack at all, and she's unimportant to our relationship. The last thing she has done that's really pushed me over the edge is come to my house on a weekday to ask me with doe eyes what I told her daughter because apparently her daughter moved out of the house that morning. The best part was that she was sick as heck when she came over. My answer was, because she, your precious, perfect daughter, doesn't want to stay with you. She's been either calling me or my husband every day since then, trying to get us to go visit her. She fell pretty sick, though, and found herself needing help and support, and guess who she turned to for that much-needed aid? No other than the, quote, worst daughter-in-law ever. This is the same woman who would just make my life a living comparison to hell with my sister-in-law, yet now she needed her daughter-in-law's help. We did not agree until we made her, own mind up about her behavior, and she actually admitted that she had been wrong to constantly pit us against each other. Imagine the irony. The very daughter she elevated on a pedestal was now not with her when she needed her the most. It's like the universe had a wicked sense of humor, and now she can never even think of comparing anyone in her life again.